Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what-ifs. Today we're jumping into part 13 of What If Banished Naruto Azula's Bodyguard. This is the end of the story. Check out the full playlist. We come so far, so strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this shinobi grinding. He ignored it and knelt down so that he was face to face with the safe, placing his hands on both sides. This was a particular kind of safe, made only in the elemental countries. You could spin the combination lock all you wanted, but if the safe didn't acknowledge your chakra, it wouldn't open for you. But he had a feeling that it would recognize him. Without saying a word, he placed his hand on the lock and spun what he thought was the combination. The sound of the safe unlocking gave him his answer. "Thank you, Mom and Dad," he said silently. He had guessed correctly that the combination was the date of his birth. Inside the safe was a single scroll. Attached to the scroll was a letter that said, "Read me first." He took the letter out, opened it, and began to read. Naruto. If you are reading this, it means that we died before we could tell you of your heritage. It is important to know the history of what is in this safe. It has a bloody past and concerns both the Uzumaki clan and the Namikaze clan. As you have probably already learned in the academy, the Sage of the Six Paths had two sons, who fought each other for the rest of their lives because of what they believed in. But there's more to the story than that. When the sage fought the Jubi, he used a special kind of sword called the Zanpakuto, which had shattered during the battle. While he had learned how to possibly repair it when initially forging it, he never felt the need to do so. And he knew that if someone were to try and successfully repair it for ill intent, it would be disastrous for the world. However, it isn't common knowledge that the sage actually had a younger brother who would become the progenitor of the Hyuga clan, but the sage's younger brother also helped out as well. So when he was on his deathbed, he entrusted the remnants of his Zanpakuto to his eldest son, Indra, and the secret to forging and repairing it to his youngest son, Ashura. As the years passed and the descendants of the two sons eventually became the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan, there was another rivalry happening. You probably aren't aware, Naruto, but the Uzumaki clan is distantly related to the Senju clan, and the Namikaze clan can claim the same with the Uchiha clan. The Namikaze clan had possession of the remnants, and the Uzumaki clan had possession of the secret. Throughout the years, the two clans have feuded with each other. For some, it was to protect what the clan held, and for others, it was to gain what the other clan had. But while the Uzumaki clan prospered through the years, the Namikaze clan was whittled down by other shinobi clans who had heard of a power they kept. Save for a few members of the main family, who fled with the remnants, they were finally wiped out during the First Shinobi World War. The survivors fled to Konoha and were given protection. And even then, they died out, leaving your father to be the only living Namikaze left. And while your mother may have been trained by her uncle Kenji, who was the current keeper of the secret and was renowned as a swordsman, the secret was passed to her by the Shodaime Hokage's wife, Mito Uzumaki, who had kept the secret before Kenji, and had passed it to him when they had heard of Uzushiobiku's destruction. Naruto, you are now the keeper of two secrets that have been kept from each for centuries. Therefore, we plead that you do not take what is in this safe unless you truly have no other choice. We plead this for the sake of your safety and sanity. Because if you try to attempt to remake the Zanpakuto of the Sage of the Six Paths and fail, you could very well lose your mind, if not your life. Please think carefully before you make your choice. And if you decide that there is no other way, then once you've taken remnants, go to the ruins of Uzushiobikure. Find the shrine in the clan head's house. Turn the sword you find there to our symbol. You will know where to go from there. Your instincts will guide you. We will always love you. Your father and mother. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. The way the words were written were not consistent, they altered between two different styles. If he had to guess, they took turns writing the letter. It was a warning, he could tell. But he had no other choice. He put the letter to the side and looked at the scroll itself. It wasn't elaborate, or had fancy drawings on its surface. It was just a plain, almost boring scroll. Are you going to admire it some more, or are you going to pick it up now? The skull asked him, sounding annoyed. He glanced upward and saw the thing was still perched on the top of the safe. Naruto didn't say anything in response. He just grabbed the scroll and closed the safe. He walked into the living room and placed the scroll in the small pack he had been packing since he had returned to the house. After double-checking that he had everything he needed, he placed the pack on his back and went for the door. He stopped and looked at the table next to the door. On it were the goggles he wore before he became a shinobi. Jiraiya had given them back to him 2 days after they had returned from the capital. He looked at it for a moment, remembering all the memories he associated it with. He looked away, only to suddenly realize that the top part of his vision was getting obscured by his hair. I should find something to hold it back, he mused to himself. Looking back to the goggles, he shrugged and grabbed them. He placed the goggles around his forehead with an ease he had forgotten. Now, finally ready, he went out the door and closed it behind him. The streets were empty. It was night and everyone was at home or at the drinking establishments celebrating Jiraiya's life. But Naruto wasn't going to risk the chance of going down the main streets and being seen. He stuck to the back alleys and side lanes, where the shadows covered him and practically everything else. He moved quickly and quietly. Even though it took him longer to get to the gate, he still made good time. He walked straight ahead, not looking back. Planning to be gone long, Naruto? Asked the voice of Kakashi, coming from the shadows that fell over the side of the gate. It looked like he had been waiting for the blonde. He almost snarled at the frustration of being found out but kept it down. How did you know? He asked in return, keeping his expression neutral. Would you be referring to the fact that you're sneaking out of the village, or that you plan to face Toby alone? The masked shinobi asked almost mildly. Both. Give me some credit, Naruto, he said with an eye smile that was barely visible in the darkness. You may have left, and you may have changed, but you are still my student. I know how you think, even if you try to deny otherwise. The blonde stifled an annoyed growl at those words. He didn't want to think that others knew how he thought. Are you going to try and stop me? If that was the case, he couldn't promise he would leave the masked shinobi alive, even though he wouldn't say that aloud. Kakashi shook his head. No, I'm not, he answered. You're like your mother when it comes to things like this. Once you've set your mind on something, it's all but impossible to change it. That's probably one of the main reasons she was able to marry Minato. He chuckled like it was an amusing memory. If you're not going to stop me, why are you here? The fire paragon wanted to waste no time, and he was being delayed by his former sensei. I'm here because I want you to do something for me, the masked shinobi told him, becoming a little more serious. And what is that? He reached down into a pouch at his side and pulled something out. When you find Toby, I want you to give this to him. He held the item for Naruto to take. The blonde did so, taking them in his hand and examining them in the moonlight. They're goggles, he said after looking them over. They were indeed goggles, but they weren't like the ones currently on his head. These had one giant lens for both eyes that was tinted orange that were connected to something that looked like they were worn over the ears by straps. Even though it looked like they had been cared for, he could still see that they were old. Yes, they are, Kakashi answered. With any luck, he will understand what they mean. So you do know him? The blonde said to him with both an accusatory tone and glare, looking up from the goggles in his hand. Maybe, once, the masked shinobi answered cryptically, earning him a scowl instead of a glare. Weren't you going? He asked, deflecting the oncoming demands. He wasn't going to explain any further. Yeah, I was, Naruto replied, stuffing the goggles into the pack. Goodbye, Kakashi. He walked past the gate and out of the village. He watched as his former student suddenly took off, running at shinobi speed down the road. Goodbye, Naruto, he said quietly into the night air as he walked away from the gate and back into the village. And don't worry, if there's anything left of the person I once knew, if you show him those goggles, you'll find out who he is. The boat sailed through the waves as the rower and his passenger made their way to the ruined island that was once the land of whirlpools. The island itself was in sight and was getting closer with every stroke of the oars. We should be there within a few minutes, sir, the sailor told Naruto. That's good to know, he replied with a nod of acknowledgement. After leaving Konoha, the blonde had traveled to the coast of the Land of Fire. When he came to one of the coastal towns, he lucked out by finding that there was a merchant ship that was leaving soon. After talking to the captain and paying a hefty sum of money for passage, he was able to convince the man to make a quick stop and drop him off at the Land of Whirlpools. As the boat came up onto the beach, Naruto jumped out of the boat and into the shallow water. Here you are, sir. The land of whirlpools, the sailor announced. But I don't know what you'll want here. This place is haunted, and the rubble hasn't been cleaned up yet. He had heard a lot of that on the short trip here. The sailors kept muttering to themselves about the land of whirlpools being haunted ghosts. Whether it was true or not didn't concern him, he had to go there. Tell your captain I said thank you for getting me here, the blonde told him in reply. Here, let me push you back out. Grabbing the boat, he pushed it back out to deeper water, soaking his clothes in the process. Once the oars started to move, he stopped and let the sailor take it from there. He turned back to the island and slogged through the water back to the beach. Now I just need to find where Yuzushiogakure is, he muttered as he walked up the beach to the forest. But before he actually went in, he heard something. Is that a fire? The faint sounds of a fire crackling were floating through his ears, coming from deeper in the forest. Sounds like it, the Kyubi agreed. Let me guess, you're going to see where it's coming from, aren't you? Is my hair yellow? He sarcastically asked back, heading into the forest. After a short walk, he found the fire. Sitting in a meditative position was an old man with a bushy white beard and ragged clothing. Hello? Said the blonde as he came closer. The old man opened his eyes and smiled. Greetings, Naruto Uzumaki. I have been waiting for you, he replied. I am Guru Puthik. How do you know who I am? He had told no one where he was going or what he was going to do, with the exception of Kakashi, but he had figured it out so it didn't count. The old man laughed heartedly. Do not worry, young one. I am not here to stop or delay your journey. In truth, I am here to help you. You still haven't answered my question. How do you know who I am? The whole world knows of you, young one, just by different names, the guru answered, the laughter fading away. But he did not change the way he spoke. On one hand, you are known as the paragon of the Fire Nation, bodyguard to the Fire Lord's sister. On the other hand, you are known as the shinobi Kikken, once of Konoha and now, serving as a mercenary to it to help rid the elemental countries of the Akatsuki. All one has to do to know your name is to listen. The Fire Paragon considered the words he heard. In a way, they made sense. All right, he said, accepting them. That's how. Now why are you here? This time, the cheeriness that was in the old man's eyes disappeared. With the grimness and seriousness on his face, he seemed to age a good amount within a few seconds. You are probably aware that I tried to help Aang and Gaara achieve balance. The blonde nodded. Soon after they had left, I had another vision. I saw you trying to forge a great and powerful weapon, only to see you fail and lose your sanity in the process. I wished to prevent that from happening. You must have misinterpreted the vision. I'm not going to fail. In all my years, for every vision I've had, that has never happened, he said solemnly. I won't fail, Naruto repeated. It almost sounded like he was trying to convince himself instead of Puthik. If you refuse my help, you will fail in your task. You have yet to find balance with yourself. Should you attempt what you plan to do without finding that balance, you will fail. No, I won't. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I won't fail. The words were almost becoming like a mantra with the way they kept being repeated in the conversation. He started to walk away, not wanting to continue this conversation. Do you even know who Naruto Uzumaki is anymore? That question made the blonde stop in his stride. You are not the same person you were when you left the village of your birth, and you are not the same person you were before you joined the 100-Year War. You are not the same person you were when you helped the Avatar end the war and returned to your land of birth. Do you know who you are? The guru repeated his question. Normally, he would have answered right away with a sarcastic comment, while also giving an honest answer. But this time, he couldn't. Puthik was right. He didn't know who he was anymore. And that scared him. It scared him to realize that even though he had somehow been brainwashed, he had changed long before that. It scared him to realize that he really was different from the person who ran away from Konoha. No, I don't, he finally admitted quietly. And because you do not know yourself, you are out of balance. But if you will let me help you, I can help you find that balance. I will be able to help you find Naruto Uzumaki again. How would you do that? Puthik smiled, letting the cheeriness return. I will tell you that when it comes time to do so. In the meantime, please sit and warm yourself by my fire. He waved his hand at said fire. I don't have time to waste, Naruto told him, holding back a snap in his voice. I have to get Yuzushiobikure as soon as I can. You must have patience, Naruto. We will get there once we have taken the time to eat and drink. He eyed the blonde's state of clothes. Besides, I would have thought you would want the chance to warm yourself up and dry your clothes, he added with a small grin. Ooh, the old man knows sarcasm. Kyubi noted with an almost excited tone of voice. I may like him. The blonde ignored the fox. He was about to say something when a wind came through and effectively reminded him that he had just been standing almost waist deep in water and the temperature was getting colder. All right, fine, he conceded as he dropped his pack onto the ground. With a few quick movements, he had stripped himself down to his undergarments. Within minutes, there was a line strung alongside the fire, and his clothes were drying on it. Would you like to have something to drink? The old man offered him a bowl with liquid sloshing around inside of it. Thank you. He took the bowl and started to drink from it, only to pause when the flavor hit his taste buds. Not to be rude, but what exactly is this stuff? He asked as he lowered the bowl. It's onion and banana juice. Quite delicious, wouldn't you say? Puthik asked back as he picked up another bowl and drank heartily from it. Naruto just watched him drink the stuff and then looked down on his own. Oh well, I've probably drunk worse, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. He raised the bowl in a drinking salute to the guru and drained it within a few short gulps. He suppressed a shudder as he felt the liquid go down his throat. This is probably going to be an acquired taste, he thought to himself. Location, Konoha. And you just let him walk past you? Azula roared as she tried to stab Kakashi repeatedly with her daggers. She wasn't having much luck, as her brother and Sokka were holding her back. He was going to leave anyway, the masked shinobi replied calmly, staying out of reach of the daggers. He had held his tongue the day after Naruto had left. At first, people hadn't really noticed that the blonde had disappeared. But eventually, starting with both Team Avatar and Team Paragon, they did. By the end of the day, people began to wonder where he was. By the end of the third, they began to actively look for him in the village. That was when Kakashi went to Tsunade, who had been about to organize a search party, and was informed of what had happened. She took it rather well, as he wasn't sent flying out of the room via a punch. She just sent for the two teams from the bending countries and had Kakashi repeat his information, thus leading to the current situation. You still could have let us know where he was going, Sokka said, his voice strained with the effort of holding Azula back. Even with the help of Zuko, it was still getting difficult. All we know is that he is going after Tobi. That's it, Tsunade reminded the tribesmen. The day after Sasuke had been brought back to the village, Kakashi had informed her and Jiraiya about the information he had received from Itachi. Once they had heard everything, Tsunade ordered him to stay silent about it, which he had no problems with. And considering all we have is a possible location, it's not much to go on. We have to do something, Katara objected from where she stood. And what would that something be, Katara? Toph asked from where she leaned against the wall with a snort. The only time you and I have been on this side of the planet was when they had baited, trapped, and killed that creepy snake guy. We don't know our way around. That didn't stop us during the war, Aang defended his girlfriend. We knew the basic lay of the land and where we were going, she fired back. We don't have that here, Twinkle Toes. We do, Suki pointed out, gesturing to Team Paragon. Suki, did you forget that we only have a possible location? June asked from where she stood against the door, her arms folded in front of her. It's better than nothing, she replied. Where else would he go? Okay, you have me there, the bounty hunter admitted after a few moments of silence. And he was smart enough to leave nothing behind that had his scent on it. You could always tell Nyla that he can finally kill Naruto, Kakashi suggested absently, keeping his focus on Azula. She appeared to be calming down, but he wouldn't call it safe just yet. For about a half minute, she looked like she was actually considering the possibility. Finally, she shook her head. No, Nyla would probably actually try to kill him, and we kinda need him alive, she said, shaking her head. Oh yes, we do need him alive, Azula said with a half snarl, half growl. Her face was one of unquestionable anger, one the original members of Team Avatar had seen on Zuko's face whenever he was really angry. I'm guessing you want Naruto alive for a different reason than the rest of us, right? Katara asked. What tipped you off, Katara? Sokka asked his sister, his sarcasm out in full force. Was it the fact that she's on the verge of going on a rampage, she's glaring daggers at Kakashi, or she really wants to find Naruto? Your sarcasm isn't needed right now, Sokka, she replied with a slight scowl. She may have missed her brother during the time he was away, but she had also forgotten about his sarcastic side. That part she didn't miss as much. Oh, I think it's needed, he replied as he refocused his efforts on Azula. However, she was beginning to calm down. The two of you can let go now, she told them, her voice still angry but also a lot calmer. Do you promise to behave and not kill Kakashi? Zuko asked his sister, keeping his grip on her. He knew well enough that if given the opportunity, she could, and would, break and kill the masked shinobi. The withering glare she threw would have made most people avert their eyes, in the fear that they would have melted. Fortunately, the two teams weren't most people. I am not a child, Zuko, she told him. I shouldn't be mad at Kakashi. I should be mad at Naruto for leaving me like this. Her lips twisted into a growl at the thought of the blonde. I'm going to find that idiot, throw him into a private room, and kick his ass until he's black and blue. And then, you will mount him and run him ragged, June said with a smirk, getting all the attention in the room. And judging by the surprised and somewhat mortified expressions on their faces, both Aang and Katara still didn't really know the other. Come on, are you telling me the two of you haven't done the bedroom tango? She asked, staring straight at the two of them. No, Katara replied instantaneously, cheeks blushing heavily. Aang, on the other hand, was confused. What's a bedroom tango? He asked. I've never heard of a dance that you could do in the bedroom. Suki decided to take pity on him and whispered the meaning into his ear. Once she was done, his entire face lit up as he stared at the bounty hunter. We should get going, he said hurriedly, moving for the door. If we want to find Naruto, we should start as soon as we can. He was out of the room before anyone could stop him. Okay, you really should dance soon, June told Katara with a deadpan voice. Both Sokka and Katara grimaced. Could you please not say stuff like that when I'm in the room, June? The water paragon asked her. They were talking about his little sister after all. Location: Land of Whirlpools. After his clothes had dried, Naruto and Puthik began to make their way to their destination. The blonde had been surprised by the fact that Puthik was able to keep up with him. They only stopped for when it was time to eat, and except for dinner, those moments were brief. Their journey had only lasted a day and a half due to this, and now, they stood at the edge of a forest. So, that is Yuzushigakure, Naruto said, almost to himself as he looked at the ruined gate that lay beyond the edge of the forest. It wasn't the same as the gate leading into Konoha. It was more like a gate to a shrine, albeit a far bigger and imposing one with walls attached to both sides of it. But whatever it looked like when the village was alive, both the gate and the walls were ruined. Yes, it was, Puthik said solemnly. It may not have been like Konoha when it was alive, but it had its own kind of life and charm. He looked over at the blonde. Are you prepared to enter? Of course I am. What's the point of me coming here if I wasn't prepared? He walked out from under the shade of the trees and headed for the gate. But with every step he took, a sense of dread and fear began to fill him. As the gate got closer, a mist began to form around it. While anyone else probably would have stopped there, he pressed on, walking through the gate and into the ruins beyond. As he walked, with Puthik a few steps behind him, he looked over the ruins of what was once his mother's home. The buildings that lined the street were smashed in, broken down, and collapsed in on themselves. Rubble littered the streets, making the pair have to watch their steps. Some of the buildings almost looked like they were still stable, but they also looked like a single touch would cause them to fall. And all the while, that sense of dread and fear stayed with Naruto. The mist followed, causing buildings to go in and out of sight, like they were there one moment and gone the next. He would have wondered what was going on with the mist, if it was some kind of jutsu, if they hadn't come to the edge of the street and looked upon a flowing river. Whoa, he breathed, looking upon it with wonder. It flowed into the ruins from the outside. It was wide enough for him to know that he couldn't leap to the other side, deep enough so that he would have to climb down and then back up to get across, and fast enough for him to know that he would be swept away before he could even get halfway. Ah, the Yang River, Puthik said as he joined Naruto. It flows in from the south. To the north is its opposite, the Yin River. And I suppose that they meet somehow in the center of the village? Naruto asked, half serious and half sarcastic. Something along those lines, he answered cryptically. Come, we must follow the river's current. He walked in the direction of the current, and Naruto followed. The mist followed them, still trying to play with what they saw, and yet it stayed clear of the river. And for someone, the blonde got the sense they weren't alone. He couldn't exactly say, but it felt like there was someone watching from the ruins. Within minutes, they reached the mouth of the river and saw that it emptied out into a lake that seemed to stretch far, as they could barely see the other side. They could see their side of the lake curved around it, like it was forming something. It curved inward gently, like one half of a circle. If Naruto had to guess, the other side was the same. But now, the mist was forming all around them, and this time, it was forming over the water of the lake. The sense of dread and fear that had been with him deepened. As the mist formed and thickened all around them, a voice rang out from all around them. Who would dare desecrate these ruins? It asked, the words echoing before finally fading away. On the path in front of them, a body began to form. It was transparent, and the clothes it wore were torn from age. But there was no mistaking the red hair the ghost had. Puthik did not say anything. He simply took a step back, giving Naruto slightly more room. One who has a need for the secret you hide, the blonde answered the ghost. As he spoke, other shapes appeared out of the mist, ghosts who took the shape of dead Uzumaki clan members. Please let me pass so I can find it. Who are you to demand such a thing? The ghost in the front asked him. The rest of the ghosts, which grew larger as they spoke, began to encircle them. My name is Naruto, he began, deciding to go with the formal introduction approach. Son of Minato Namikaze. Namikaze! Roared several of the ghosts, in anger and outrage. They then began to list off what they thought of the Namikaze clan. Murderers. Thieves. Looters. Hoarders. On and on they screamed, shouted, yelled, howled, and bellowed at Naruto, spewing curses and threats at him. But he didn't say anything in response, even though it was severely tempting to do so. The shouting stopped when the lead ghost drew the katana he wore at his side. You should never have come here, Namikaze. You've forfeited your life by telling us who you are, he said as he approached the blonde. I am asking you all to step aside, Naruto told him, looking at all of them. He restrained himself from saying anything else. If he did, it wouldn't have been good. But even what he had said incited the ghost. Don't push your luck, brat. He spat at the blonde. Only those of the Uzumaki clan may command us. With a battle cry, he charged forward with his katana raised high. When he came within striking distance, he swung down, intent on killing the Namikaze in front of him. But when Naruto reached out and grabbed his hands, forcing them apart, he was shocked. That's impossible, he objected as he struggled to free his hands. Our clan was destroyed. The blonde was angered at those words. Without thinking it through, he slammed his head into the ghost's and sent him to the ground. Some of us survived, he shouted at the fallen ghost. He turned his furious gaze upon the rest of the ghosts. And don't assume I'm just from one clan either. My father may have been a Namikaze, but my mother was an Uzumaki. That got a reaction from the ghosts all around him. They stared at him like they couldn't believe what had just come out of his mouth. What was your mother's name? The fallen ghost demanded as he stood back up. The look on his face said that if he was given a wrong answer, he would cleave Naruto into two. Kushina Uzumaki, he answered without hesitation and earned looks of recognition from the ghosts. Now I'm going to ask you all again, stand aside and let us pass. The lead ghost stepped forward and examined Naruto's face carefully, like he was looking for something that was hidden. I can see her in you, he said, almost to himself. His gaze hardened. Why do you need what we have protected all these years? I'm heading to what could be my death, and I have no other choice. I wouldn't have come if I truly did not know another way. He reached around to the pack and began to search through it. When he found what he was looking for, he began to pull it out. Besides, I've already brought the other thing needed. He held up the scroll for all to see. If his mother's name had surprised all the ghosts, they were floored when they saw what he held. Is that truly? The ghost began to ask, only to trail off. Naruto nodded. This scroll holds the remnants of the Zanpakuto wielded by the sage of the Sixth Path, and was shattered in his fight against the Jubi, he proclaimed. Now, I go to fight against a man who would seek to bring the Jubi back once more. The ghosts all turned toward the one who had spoken first, a single question on all their faces. He was silent for a long second. We stand aside for you, children of Namikaze and Uzumaki. You may pass. And like a wind blowing through, the ghosts and the mist faded away, revealing the ruins once again. Once he saw that they were gone, Naruto put the scroll away and released the breath he had unconsciously been holding. Phew, that was he tried to find the word that could define what had just happened, but nothing came to him. Indeed it was, Puthik said, taking that step forward again. In life, I don't think there would have been anyone brave enough to headbutt the Ken no Ryushu. He froze when he heard that. You mean that was Kenji Uzumaki? He asked. When the guru nodded, he couldn't help but chuckle. Somewhere, somehow, I just know that my mother is laughing. He started walking again and Puthik followed. This time, the sense of dread and fear were gone. That feeling of being watched was still there, but now it was more of curious nature. The ghosts that inhabited the ruins now knew him, they were just curious to see what he would do. With the mist cleared, they now had a much better view of the surrounding area. The ruins of buildings lined the other side of the street, opposite to the lake. Judging by the faded and wrecked signs that still remain on some of the buildings, it must have been a place for cafes and stores. For an instant, he could see people sitting at tables under the sky and the sun, admiring how the lake glittered like a blue jewel underneath the light of the sun. It was a picture that almost made him wish he could see the place when it was alive. But then the moment passed, the picture faded away, and he remembered that he had something to do. On and on, the two of them kept walking. Puthik took the lead, his feet remembering paths he had once walked. At the end of the street, he turned to head back into the village. Naruto followed, looking briefly behind them at the lake's edge. While the majority of the edge had a rail to prevent anyone from accidentally falling in, right behind them was a single spot where there was no rail. He was only curious for a moment before realizing that the guru wasn't stopping and hurried after him. When Puthik did finally stop, it was in front of a compound that had a large building that was still somewhat standing. What's this place? Naruto asked the old man, stopping beside him. This is the house of the clan head, he answered. What you seek is inside. How do you know all these things anyway? He smiled in reply. I have been around for a long time, and I have been to many places. I also know many things. For instance, when Uzushiogakure was created, it wasn't built around a lake. Now come, the first to enter this hall should be an Uzumaki, he urged. Okay. He took the first step into the compound, and then took another. Once he was actually past the gate of the compound, he started walking to the house. With Puthik behind him, they crossed the compound and went into the house. His heart filled momentarily with sadness when he saw how wrecked it was inside. He could tell that this was a beautiful house if it wasn't ruined. There was rubble strewn across the floor, pieces of stone, mortar, and wood. The walls had cracks running through them, some joining and then dividing, creating a web that was on all the walls. Where do I find the shrine? He asked as he heard Puthik step inside behind him. The last time I checked, it was to the back, adjacent to the clan head's bedroom, the guru answered. He followed the instructions, stepping over the rubble that littered the floor and being careful not to touch anything, lest it break and fall down, bringing up part of the house with them. And even though he tried to be delicate with the way he walked, his footsteps echoed all around him. It made the place feel larger than it actually was. They had to make a few turns to get to the back, as it wasn't a straight shot from the front door to the back. When he finally found the shrine, he was surprised by how well it was preserved. If he had seen the shrine first, and only the shrine, he would have thought that the house was in prime condition. But then, he would have thought that the rest of the house would have been a bit plain. The shrine wasn't extravagant by any means. There were only two things that mattered in the shrine: an altar to the left of the entrance, where the clan head or anyone else must have prayed at, and statue whose base was where the altar was placed. Even though the mason who had carved the statue had done it so the hood had covered the face, and thus ridding himself of the need to carve the face, Naruto could tell who it was from the first glance. The Sage of the Six Paths, he stated with reverence. He wasn't sure how he knew who it was, he just did. Indeed it is, Puthik agreed as he too looked at it. It was an ordinary statue. There was no color painted on it, thus leaving it all unblemished gray. The only kind of clothes the statue had been carved with was a robe to cover the body, and the hood that covered the head and face. Held in the statue's left hand was a shakujo and held in the right was a katana, raised to strike. When Naruto saw the katana, his mind instantly went to that scroll in the pack. So, what am I to do now? He asked aloud. That is something you will have to answer yourself, the old man answered. I cannot give you all the answers, can I? He asked jokingly. The blonde didn't answer that. His attention was fully on the statue. He walked to it and began examining it. A quick look around confirmed the fact that the stone katana was the only sword in the room. I'm supposed to turn the sword to the symbol, he mused to himself. But how am I supposed to move a stone sword? More importantly, where is the symbol? Another look around showed him that there was no Uzumaki symbol in the shrine. The only other thing of significance was a small window opposite of the statue, an altar that showed the road they come from. Do you have any ideas, Fox? Huh? What? The Kyuubi asked, drowsiness filling his voice. The Fire Paragon couldn't believe it. How can you be sleeping at a time like this? He demanded. Hey, I felt like taking a nap. You've never had a problem with it before, the Biju defended himself, a little annoyed by the accusation. Well, do you have ideas? Nope, not a single one. Good night. He went to sleep instantly, his snores filling the ears of his Jinchuriki. Had this been any other day, or any other mood, Naruto would have started yelling at the Kyuubi. But that wasn't what he needed right now. He had to remain focused on figuring this all out. Why couldn't my clansmen have made this easier? He asked himself. They could have at least given me a clue to where the symbol was. Annoyed, he went over to the window and looked out. He could see all the way out to the lake. He froze at that realization. The Yang River comes in from the south and the Yin River comes in from the north. They both meet in the middle of the village in a lake. And when Yang and Yin come together, they form Yin Yang. He shook his head slightly. But it's not just that. There's something about that lake, I know it. The Uzumaki wouldn't have settled around just an ordinary lake, not when the name of the village is Yuzushiogakure. Does it have something to do with the rivers? And that's when it hit him. When Yin Yang was formed, it didn't just stay in one place. The two energies circled each other in a never-ending dance. If something like that was to happen with two rivers, something would have definitely happened. Puthik, did my clan build Yuzushiogakure around a whirlpool? He asked the guru. Yes, they did, but it wasn't known as Yuzushiogakure when they did. This village had stood for a long time and the whirlpool they built the village around had only stopped churning when they had been attacked and destroyed, Puthik answered, bowing his head in what was probably for the dead. But why build here? What was so special about this particular whirlpool? He smiled mysteriously. It was a part of their duty to protect the secret. While the blonde frowned at the lack of an actual answer, he was glad to know that he was going somewhere with all of this. Okay, so that's the symbol. He looked out the window. And that's the sword. He looked back at the statue. Now how the hell am I supposed to get that thing to point out the window? He walked back over to the statue and looked over it again. But no matter how it looked, the statue looked the same. I guess it wouldn't be as simple as being able to move the sword arm, the blonde thought to himself as he idly reached out for the right arm. As his hand touched the stone, he felt it move, which made him freeze in place and take his hand off of the statue. It cannot be that simple. Have you found something? Puthik asked from the side. He couldn't see what Naruto was doing exactly, but he could tell that something was up. I might have, the blonde hesitantly answered. He slowly reached for the statue's arm again and pressed gently down. The arm began to move down as well, the sound of stone grating against stone filling the room. It was slightly jarring, but he paid it no mind, choosing to focus on the arm. It moved slowly and he had the feeling that he tried to make it move any faster, it would either break or stop. When it did stop, the arm was down and the point of the sword was pointing in the direction of the window. A loud clicking sound echoed off the walls and the altar started sinking into the ground, making him step back in surprise. The floor followed the altar, lowering itself until it formed a stairway leading down into darkness. Ingenious, simple, and not obvious at first sight, the guru mused with a smile. Uzumaki handiwork at its finest, he declared. Come. He made his way over to the first step, the altar, and started walking down them. Naruto followed and they descended into the darkness. The steps went back up after they had walked down them, leaving no easy way out. Guru Puthik, I have a question for you, the blonde asked as they walked down a tunnel. Despite the initial darkness, they had soon discovered chakra lanterns had been installed along the walls, giving the tunnel a soft blue glow. What is it? You said that you would help me find balance with myself, but you wouldn't say how. Will you tell me now? Indeed, I shall. I plan to have you find your balance by unlocking your chakras. Naruto was confused. Last time I checked, my chakra wasn't under lock and key. The old man laughed at that. I do not mean that. What I call your chakras, you would call the 8 gates. They are the same, the former is the spiritual side, and the latter is the physical. If you open them, you will be able to find balance. As he listened to those words, he vaguely remembered something he had heard from a fire sage. Aren't there only 7 chakras? He asked. The way you're talking, there's an extra one. There is, the guru admitted. I taught it to Gaara when he and Aang had come to me. Why did you only teach it to Gaara? I would have thought Aang would have learned it as well, since he is the Avatar. It was because he is the Avatar that I didn't try to have him open it. The Avatar cannot open the 8th chakra because the Avatar is not just one person. He is 2 and 1 changes constantly. His tone made Naruto understand that he meant what he said. If you say so, the blonde said hesitantly. He didn't know what the supposed chakra was supposed to be anyway, so he couldn't object. I guess I'll learn about it soon. Actually, you will learn it sooner than you would think. He stopped walking. We are here. Naruto looked around the guru's shoulder. In front of them was an opening in the tunnel. There was some light in the room beyond the opening, but not enough to see what was in there from where he stood. When Puthik went in and he followed, he was able to see what lay inside. It was a circular space that was roomy enough to have a few people move through it. Above them were a few chakra lanterns, which gave the room the bare amount of light. On one side of the room was a forge that had no fire going, making it almost look like a mouth wanting something to eat. In the middle of the room was an anvil standing on a stone pedestal. Next to it was a barrel full of water. Off to the side was a workbench, which had a hammer and a set of tongs laying on it. As the blonde stepped into the room, he could all but hear the room humming slightly. What's that sound? He asked. That would be the lake moving all around us, Puthik casually mentioned. He looked over at the guru. We're under the lake? Now that he thought about it, and remembered the distance they had walked through the tunnel, it made sense. He felt a little foolish for asking the question. We are in the direct center of the lake, the old man answered. Now once you are prepared, I will help you open your chakras. He stepped off to the side and waited there, giving Naruto more room there. Well, that may take a while, the blonde replied as he closely examined what was there. The forge doesn't have anything that could start a fire or keep it going for that matter. And I'm surprised that those tongs and hammer haven't rusted away. I mean, look at the amount of rust on them. The 2 items looked like they had been painted a dust red because of all that rust. Oddly enough, the water in the barrel looked fine. Puthik only smiled. Do not be so sure, he said mysteriously. How do you know that the forge doesn't have everything it needs? I can tell just by looking at it. He protested, but the guru only kept smiling. Stifling a snarl of frustration, he went over to the forge and turned around. See? There's nothing here, he said again, gesturing into the forge. As he did, his hand lightly brushed against the stone side. At that moment, a complex seal array revealed itself. Naruto felt a slight drain of his chakra, making him step back, ready to engage whatever enemy appeared. Instead, he saw the forge was now burning a bright blue fire without any kind of charcoal or billows to help it, illuminating the room. When he looked over at the workbench, he saw that the hammer and tongs were now brightly polished, not a single speck of rust on them. Did you? He began to ask Puthik, leaving the question open. The guru just smiled again. Did I say I did? Again, the blonde stifled a snarl of frustration. That's almost as annoying as when the fox is right or when Sifu decides to be mysterious, he thought to himself as he walked over to the workbench. I heard that, Kyuubi muttered sleepily. His Jinchuriki ignored him, focusing instead on removing any clothes that might become unnecessary in the upcoming process. Once he had done so, placing the pack underneath, he retrieved the scroll and put it on the workbench, unraveling it to reveal the seal. He grouped his hands into a quick hand seal and muttered Kai. The seal glowed briefly and then was engulfed in a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, what the scroll had held lay on it. He looked upon 9 broken pieces of a katana. In the light of the forge, they looked dull and lifeless. He would later admit that was an odd way of describing them, but it worked at the time. Curious and intrigued, he reached out and took hold of the handle. The grip felt slightly uncomfortable, just enough to make him continually try to find a better grip, only to fail. He placed the metal part of the piece in his other hand, still trying to find that better grip. But as he did, he felt the metal slice his hand. "Ah!" he shouted, pulling his hand away from it. His blood flew through the air, droplets falling on each of the pieces. The wound healed quickly enough, but he was annoyed with himself for not realizing it was still sharp. "Perhaps we can start now?" Puthik asked mildly from where he stood. Naruto would have thrown a look at the guru, but decided against it, seeing as he had a point. "Yeah, we'll start. I must warn you, Naruto. Opening the chakras will be nothing you have ever experienced in your life," he warned the blonde, his tone turning serious and his face aging with that seriousness. "You cannot stop once we begin." "I understand," Naruto replied with equal seriousness. Without waiting, he took hold of the handle piece and the tongs. Going what his instincts were whispering in his ear, he placed the piece in the grip of the tongs and held it in the fire of the forge. The blue fire eagerly embraced the metal, rapidly heating the broken end, quicker than he had ever seen before. When the broken end was a bright yellow-orange, he knew it was the time to pull it out. He did so and placed the piece on the anvil. Taking a hold of the next piece with the tongs, they had been placed in the scrolls so that each piece would have been a perfect fit to the previous one. He held it in the fire, taking it out when it was the same bright yellow-orange and placing it next to the handle piece. When the two broken ends matched perfectly, he lowered the goggles onto his eyes. "I am ready," he declared, reaching for the hammer. "Then first, we shall open the earth chakra, known to the shinobi as the Gate of Opening. It is located at the base of the spine. It deals in survival and is blocked by fear." "What are you most afraid of, Naruto?" the guru asked him. The second he began to hammer on the broken pieces, the blonde felt like his body went on autopilot. Every time the hammer struck the metal, a vision flashed before his eyes. Tinted red, he saw himself when he lost control and the Kyuubi's chakra took hold, destroying everything in his path. He saw Danzo standing over him, cane in hand, and telling him how worthless he was. And he saw the Akatsuki, the ones he knew, with their faces showing themselves and the rest hidden in shadow. They kept repeating themselves, over and over again, and each time, his fear grew. "Stop it, stop showing me these things," he said aloud, his breathing becoming erratic. "They are not real, Naruto," Puthik's voice told him, somehow being able to speak over the sound of metal hitting metal. "They make you think of your own survival, but they are not real. If you wish to find balance, you must let these fears fade away." When he heard the guru's voice, he was able to calm himself. When the vision of him losing control appeared again, he stood firm. "It's never happening again," he said in silence. "You are dead. You will haunt me no more," he told Danzo. "Your days are numbered, and I will end them," he promised the Akatsuki. One by one, the visions faded away and his fear of them vanished along with. A chime rang in his ears and the two pieces were now one. His body still on autopilot, he put the hammer down, took hold of the handle, and plunged it into the barrel of water. The glow of the yellow-orange where the two pieces had been put together shone for a moment in the water before darkening. Another vision came before his eyes. But this time, he saw the same bone-white skull that had been in his dreams. It had a spine attached to it. "Congratulations, Naruto, you have opened the first chakra," Puthik told him as he pulled a cloth out and dried the now longer piece. He took the tongs, put the next piece in its grip and held it in the fire. Once the end was the right color, he lined them up and began hammering again, absently noting that the humming coming from the outside sounded a little louder. "Next is the water chakra, known to the shinobi as the Gate of Healing, and is located in the sacrum," the guru continued. "It deals with pleasure and is blocked by guilt. What guilt do you carry with you?" The visions came again, but differently. They were tinted orange and showed each and every soldier that had died under his command or alongside him. He also saw every single time he had gone to a fallen comrade's house and told their family the news they never wanted to hear. He could see their fallen faces, their tears, the silent pleas for it not to be true, even though they knew that it was. "I failed them," he said to himself, the hammer ringing in his ears. "I failed all of those soldiers and their families. Their deaths are my responsibility. You must accept the fact that they have happened, but do not let them fill your mind. You must be able to forgive yourself." "But how can I do that?" he asked. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it is. You just have to try, the old man urged him. As the visions continued, he summoned up his courage and silently spoke 2 words. I'm sorry. And just like that, the visions vanished, and the chimes rang in his ears. He plunged the blade into the barrel and saw the skull now also had the bones of a torso. The humming got louder again, but he paid it no mind as he pulled the blade out and dried it. He just went for the next piece, held it in the fire until the end glowed, placed it against the ever-growing blade and started pounding them together. Third is the fire chakra, known to the shinobi as the gate of life. The guru spoke again. It is located in the stomach. It deals with willpower and is blocked by shame. What are you ashamed of? This time, the visions were tinted yellow. Again, he saw the soldiers that he had lost. But this time, he saw them die again and again. He saw how Gao died mere inches away from him. He saw how old Li died by being crushed by a boulder, and how Yin died with a piece of wood in her eye. He saw the ship sinking again. He saw how he sent soldiers into the battlefield, only to see them die, whether from a distance or close up, it didn't matter. He saw how he had been forced to kill his own soldiers when they were in such incredible pain that death would have been a mercy. He watched them die, and he knew that it was his fault. I couldn't save them, he said aloud, his voice carrying past the sound of the hammer. I wasn't enough. You weren't enough of what? I wasn't enough of anything, he answered, his tone turning harsh. I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't strong enough, and I wasn't fast enough to save them. It wasn't enough. Just as you forgave yourself for letting those soldiers, you must also do the same for not being what you say, Puthik told him. Let your shame flow away. I can't do that, he protested. It would feel like those soldiers meant nothing to him when that wasn't true. It was my shame that made me keep trying to push past my own limits. If I let it go, it would have all been in vain. You know that isn't true, Naruto. It is not your shame that makes you constantly push past your own limit. Rather, it is your will and drive. The shame you carry has followed those 2 things and presented itself whenever you searched for a reason. You have to let go of that shame. As he listened, the blonde realized that the guru was right. He always had that willpower to keep testing his limits. His shame was just his lie for doing it. When that realization struck, his shame melted away. The chimes rang again as the 2 pieces were made into one, and as he plunged the blade into the barrel, he saw the skull now had legs. When the glow from the blade faded away in the water, he pulled it out and dried it. He took the next piece, held it in the fire of the forge, and placed it against the blade once it had reached the proper heat. All the while, the humming turned into rumbling. The 4th chakra is located in the heart, Puthik said as the hammering began anew. It is the air chakra, known to the shinobi as the gate of pain. It deals with love and is blocked by grief. What has caused you grief, Naruto? A lot of things, he answered honestly. Visions that were tinted green appeared before his eyes. He saw the soldiers he had known alongside his parents, Haku and Jiraiya. They all stood around him, quiet smiles on their faces. I've lost a lot of people. But their love has not left you. It has changed and been reborn in the form of new love. You know this, the old man told him. And he did. All of the people who stood before him in the vision changed. Their bodies and faces morphed into familiar ones. Now he looked upon Team Paragon and Team Avatar, Irika, Enko and her team, Konohamaru and his teammates, and surprisingly, some of the Konoha 11. He let the pain of grief disappear from himself, and heard the chimes ring in his ears. He saw the skull gain arms as he plunged the blade into the barrel. The rumbling got louder as he pulled the blade out and dried it. He absently noted that some pieces of the wall were beginning to fall off. But he was focused on heating the next piece, and then making it become one with the blade. The 5th is the sound chakra, known to the shinobi as the gate of limit, and is located in the throat, Puthik spoke, his voice flowing over the hammering and the rumbling. It deals with truth and is blocked by lies, the kind of lies that we tell ourselves. Do you tell yourself such lies? As he hammered down, visions tinted sky blue showed him the moments when the teams from Konoha had chased after him, pleading with him to come back. I do, he finally admitted. When the people from my past, the past I tried to leave behind, tried to bring me back, I refused and told them to leave me alone. I wanted them to think that I didn't care about them anymore. And did you? All of a sudden, he could remember the dungeon underneath Ba Sing Se, when he had all but forced the Konoha teams to leave. Kiba's words echoed in his ear. Go ahead, Naruto. You just keep on running. But when you finally stop, we'll be there. We'll always be there to bring you back. No. On some level, I was happy that they cared. He wasn't sure what level that was, but he knew it there. He had just buried it underneath disbelief and lies. Now, it was facing him straight in the face, and he didn't look away. He accepted it. The chimes rang and the blade grew longer with another piece attached. When the blade was plunged into the barrel, he could see the skull now had hands and feet. The rumbling continued and even more rocks were falling from the walls. But still, he paid no attention to it as he dried the blade. The light chakra, known to the shinobi as the Gate of View, is the sixth, the old man told him as he began again. It is located in the center of the forehead. It deals with insight and is blocked by illusions. Such illusions hold you in their snare, Naruto. What do you mean? No illusions have their hold on me, he protested. He had the fox to help prevent that kind of problem. Are you so sure? The guru asked with a somewhat amused smile. Tell me, what separates a person from the Fire Nation and a person from the Water Tribes, or a person from the Earth Kingdom and an air nomad? Better yet, what separates someone from the Bending Countries and someone from the Elemental Countries? As he heard the question, the people themselves appeared to him in a vision that was tinted indigo. They all wore their own garb that made them who they were. You said it yourself, he answered. They all are from different places. And that is an illusion. It is the greatest one there is, the illusion of separation. We are all human and we are all one people, but we live as if we are different from one another. But nothing in this world is separate from anything. Everything is connected, he finished, somehow knowing what the old man was saying. And suddenly it made sense. If you took away what they thought they were, all that was left was the fact that they were all human. No one was really different from another. The chimes rang in his ears as he made the connection, and when he plunged the blade into the barrel, he saw that the skull now had muscles, tendons, and blood. The rumbling turned into shaking and there were small leaks in the walls, dripping water into the room as he pulled the blade out and dried it. But he couldn't stop. He only had 2 pieces left. We are approaching the end, Puthik said, ignoring what was happening all around them as well. These last 2 will be the most difficult to open. Are you ready? Of course I am, he answered, having heated the next piece and lined it up to the blade. The 7th is the thought chakra, known to the shinobi as the Gate of Wonder, and is located at the crown of the head. It deals with pure cosmic energy, and is blocked by earthly attachment. You must find what attaches you to this world, and then let them go. That last sentence made the autopilot stop. The hand that held the hammer had been raised to deliver another strike but was now held in place as the blonde looked at the guru. You want me to what? He demanded, violet tinted vision showing all that he held dear. You must let them go, Puthik repeated. I can't do that, he protested. If I let them go, it would be like I was abandoning them. Everyone I've known, everyone I've lost, and everyone I've loved. I can't make them go away like that. You must if you wish to find balance. You must let them go. He tried to find the words to express what he was feeling but couldn't. Yet he also knew that if he refused and stopped there, he would fail. That was something he could not afford to happen, he had to do it. Closing his mouth, he brought the image of the people he cherished to his mind. And with every swing of the hammer, he let them go. They faded away, one by one, and each one made him want to stop. But he still kept going. When Azula, being the last one, disappeared, he felt that there was nothing attaching him to the planet. And he had never felt more alone. As the chimes rang in his ears, he plunged the blade into the barrel and saw that the skull was now a human being, now having skin, hair, and nails. And yet, it still looked lifeless, even when he dried the blade. The shaking that had shaken the room, as well as the leaking water and the falling rocks had stopped. But it didn't feel like it had ended. It felt more like the calm before the storm. Naruto didn't say anything as he placed the last piece, the tip, in the grip of the tongs and held it in the fire of the forge. Are you ready? Puthik asked him as he took the heated piece out, placed it against the blade and swung the hammer. Just start, he answered shortly, focused on what was in front of him. He felt like he was actively in control of his body again. Then I shall. The last in the chain is the mirror chakra, known to the shinobi as the Gate of Death. It is located in the eyes. It deals with acceptance and is blocked by denial. You must look deep inside yourself and accept who you are, and what you were. He wasn't sure how to do that when he was so focused on the blade. But when the two pieces surprisingly joined after a few seconds, all hell broke loose. All of a sudden, the walls of the room shattered apart, taking the forge and the lights with them. But they didn't strike him, or the guru. Instead, they were swept away by the twisting water of the whirlpool that now had the room in its center. Somehow, the barrel of water had fallen over, spilling the water it held. All Naruto and Puthik could see now were the twisting walls of water surrounding, the sound engulfing their ears. While he had been surprised by what happened, Naruto quickly refocused. The blade was now complete, but it hadn't been cooled. The area where the two pieces had joined still glowed and he couldn't use the barrel's contents, as they were now gone. How am I supposed to cool this? He asked himself, only to see the whirlpool all around him. Then, an idea struck him. It was potentially risky, but it could work. If this doesn't work, I will bend over and let Azula kick my ass. He silently promised as he approached the whirlpool on the opposite side from Puthik. He drew the blade back and with a great shout, plunged it into the twisting water. As soon as the blade touched the water, it almost dragged him into the water. But he planted his feet and held the blade against the current. It took every ounce of his strength to hold it there and not let it go. But it wasn't enough. He could feel his feet starting to slip. Growling in effort, he applied his chakra to his feet, keeping them steady and not letting him slip any further. As he held the blade in the current, forcing himself to ignore the uncomfortable grip he had on the handle, he found himself seeing the colored visions he had experienced before now. They all came at him in a blur, one thing from one vision mixing in with another, two colors mixing together. He didn't know what to do about them, they were confusing and disorienting. But he held onto the blade, never letting go of it. When the last vision passed, of Azula in green and purple, a light bounced off the anvil and struck the corner of his eye. The goggles he wore did nothing to stop the light trying to blind him, so he was forced to blink. When he opened them again, he found that he had no blade, and he was in a dark void. Where the hell am I? He asked, looking around to see if there was anything there. You are in yourself, a voice answered his question. He knew that voice, it belonged to the skull. But when he turned to where the voice had come from, what he saw was himself. What the hell? He breathed out as he looked upon his copy. They didn't look exactly the same. The copy wore orange pants, an orange and black jacket with the white swirl hanging from the left shoulder, a pair of black sandals, and a black bandana that proudly bore the metal plate with the symbol of Konohagakure on it. What is this? The original demanded. This? The copy asked, lifting a hand in self-gesture. While it may look like him, it was the skull's voice that came from the mouth. This was a possibility. It was what you could have been, if you stayed with the village. So this is what I was, he said, mostly to himself as he stared. And what you could have been. The question is, what will you do? Will you try to forget what happened? I might have, if I hadn't had Puthik's help, he finally admitted. Now that his chakras were opened, even though some of them were painful to do so, he realized that had he tried to do this on his own, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. He now knew that there wasn't any real difference between what he was then and what he was now. Even if he didn't call himself one, he thought and fought like a shinobi. The complete meaning of that state of mind hadn't really hit home until just then. I've been running from my past for some time now. Maybe it's time for me to stop and accept who I am. So what will you do? It asked again, this time with a tone of curiosity. Will you deny that I exist? No, I won't do that. I know that you were the Zanpakuto for the Sage of the Six Paths and that you were shattered in his fight against the Jubi. Why would I deny you when you've been trying to get my attention? He asked the rhetorical question. He walked over to the copy and stopped in front of it. You are me, he said, holding out his hand in a fist bump. The copy smiled at the answer. I am you, it replied, bumping its fist against his. And we are who we are, the two of them said in unison. At that moment, a warm light filled the dark void, engulfing them both. This time, it wasn't chimes that filled their ears, but the deep ringing of a bell. And in that light with the bell ringing in his ears, Naruto learned a name. When he opened his eyes, Naruto saw that they were no longer in the middle of the whirlpool. Instead, they, for a lack of a better word, rested on the top of it, allowing the whole of the lake and surrounding village to be seen. Turning his head, he saw Puthik standing there. Did I do it? He asked quietly. Yes. You did. You have opened all the chakras and found balance with yourself, Puthik answered with a gentle smile. Relief flooded him, glad to know he had succeeded. Suddenly figuring out that he was holding something, he looked down and saw that the Zanpakuto was in his hand. Before, the pieces of metal that was the blade had looked dull and lifeless. Now, the blade gleamed with an inner light. The grip, which had been continuously uncomfortable before, now felt like it was the perfect fit. He noted, with a little bit of amusement, that the hilt was alternating bands of orange and black. I guess I need a sheath for this, he said aloud, taking the goggles off of his eyes. That was when something on the workbench had caught his eye. The scroll that had carried the remnants was gone, and in its place was a sheath of dark wood. He walked over and took it in his free hand, sheathing the Zanpakuto inside of it, and found it to be a perfect fit. He turned to Puthik and bowed. Thank you, Guru Puthik, for teaching me, he said, meaning every word. It was my pleasure to teach you, Paragon Naruto, Puthik replied, clasping his hands together and bowing in return. Now, I believe that it is time that you left to do what needed to be done. He gestured, and when the blonde looked in the direction, he saw a pathway connecting the area where they stood to the village, right at where that gap in the railing was. What about you? He asked as he took the pack out from under the workbench and pulled out the clothes he had taken off. He put them on in a timely fashion. I will stay here a while and commune with the ghosts that still inhabit the village, the old man answered. All right, just don't do it out here. I'd hate to hear that you fell into the whirlpool, he said jokingly. The guru laughed as well. You are quite right. Well then, goodbye. He walked down the path and back onto the land, leaving Puthik in the middle of the lake and the whirlpool. Did I miss anything important? Kyubi asked with a yawn as he woke up. More than you will ever know, Fox, the blonde replied as he left the way he came. That feeling of being watched had disappeared. He guessed that his ghostly clansmen had approved of him. Soon, he walked out past the gate of the village and went into the forest, leaping for the trees. He flew through the air, using the tree branches to fly and put the ruins of Yuzushiyogakure behind him. This time, he was almost sad to leave, but he still had to. He was about 2 hours, at shinobi speeds, away from the ruins when he suddenly landed in a clearing. You might as well come out, he said aloud. I know that you're there. After a few seconds of silence, all 6 of the Pains stepped into view, along with Conan. I had hoped it would be you guys, he told the Pains, noticing the way they were subtly twitching as he reached for the hilt of his Zanpakuto. I've got a bone to pick with you. They had separated into 3 groups: the people who traveled on Appa, the people who traveled on Fawning, the dragon and the flying bison, as well as Momo, had come along for the surprise, and the people who were walking alongside Nyla. They were on their way to the possible location of the mountain's graveyard. While they weren't traveling with anyone else, Tsunade had told them a team of shinobi would be following and provide additional support until additional reinforcements arrived. Since they were going to the possible headquarters of the Akatsuki, chances were not being taken. Any luck? Ing asked June as he brought Appa down close. He was still a little nervous to be around the bounty hunter, mostly because he didn't want to get punched like that again. No, she answered shortly, trying to stay focused on handling Nyla. The Shirsha shared his mistress' dislike for the airbender. The difference was he was more inclined to act on it. He looked over at Sokka and Akela, who were on the ground along with June and Nyla. What about you, Sokka? Aang, if June and Nyla don't have his scent, what makes you think we have it? The tribesman asked, his sarcasm coming out in full force. As they headed for the mountain's graveyard, they were also looking for Naruto, figuring that he would have come this way. But so far, they have had no luck. I was just asking, he replied a little defensively. He urged Appa back higher into the air, not wanting to continue the conversation. Let me guess, they're having no luck? Zuko asked drily. Both he and Azula were riding Fawning. Everyone else sat in Appa's saddle, some simply lounged, and some were keeping an eye out for anything that told them that Naruto had been there. So far, there was nothing. What do you think? Toph asked, speaking before Aang did. Besides, I thought we were heading somewhere, not looking for the resident pain in the ass. You're going to have to be a little more specific than that, Toph, Suki told her. The Kyoshi warrior was wearing her full gear. But there was a small smile on her face as she spoke those words. We have many pains in the ass. I'm talking about Naruto, duh, the blind earthbender said with a roll of her eyes, exaggerating it just to show off the fact that she was blind. Who else would I be talking about? Don't you dare answer that question, Suki, Azula ordered from where she sat on the back of Fanning, her face set in a warning scowl. Suki could only laugh when she saw that scowl. All right, I won't, she replied, easing against the saddle's side. The spirits know I don't need a lightning bolt from you when you're like this. Like what? You're always like this when Naruto leaves without letting you know. You start getting snappish and irritated at the smallest thing. And if it goes on long enough, you'll start looking for excuses to try setting one of us on fire. She pointed out the facts, using her fingers to list them off. And when he finally does come back, you're torn between hitting him and kissing him. So currently, she's going to put him in a coma or take him right on the spot? Zuko asked with a grin. Azula tried hitting him upside the head, but he ducked. Suki matched his grin. Pretty much. Nice to know that nothing's really changed after you guys left, Toph commented. Secretly, she had worried that they would be different when the two teams met again. While that was true in some aspects, enough was the same that she was glad. Ask Toph if she managed to find someone. Sokka shouted from below. Sokka wants to, his girlfriend began to repeat. I heard him. The earthbender in question snapped before looking over the side of Appa. And it's none of your business, Sokka. Toph, he's on the other side, Katara told her. Oddly enough, no one said a word, mostly because they had gotten so used to the fact that things like that were going to happen with Toph. Hey guys, can we talk about something? Aang asked, looking back from where he sat atop of Appa's head. What about? Asked Zuko as he flew Fanning in a little closer. About that ringing bell sound we all heard. About a day before they had left, everyone in Konoha felt the earth tremble as a bell ringing echoed in the air. When they heard that bell, everyone felt something. They weren't what that feeling was exactly, but they all felt that for some reason, they should be in awe. However, Aang felt something different. He felt an inkling of familiarity and fear. It was like he had known what something was and knew enough to be afraid. What's there to talk about? Toph asked back without a care. Sure, she felt humbled by the feeling, but she also moved past it. It had just been a brief feeling, there wasn't anything to talk about. I don't know. It's just he tried to find the right words but couldn't. It's just what, Aang? Katara asked her boyfriend, concern evident in her voice. He just shrugged his shoulders, unable to answer. Do I have to come up there and slug him again? June asked from beneath them, sounding hopeful. Aang shifted his focus back to flying when he heard that, a small look of fear on his face. No, you don't need to do that. He hurriedly shouted down at her. I'm just going to focus on flying. You do that, she replied. Location: Naruto. It had taken him 3 days since reaching the mainland from the land of whirlpools, but it turned out that the information he and his team had gotten turned out to be correct. I know you're there, Toby. He shouted out loud as he stood in front of the mountain's graveyard. Are you going to come out, or am I going to have to drag you out? Well, he certainly is confident, spoke a snarling voice as Zetsu rose out of the ground. The question is, will he be able to back that confidence? A second voice asked, the lips on the white side of Zetsu moving as it spoke. Where's Toby? Naruto asked the creature in front of him, not backing down. As if to answer his demand, a hole appeared in the air, twisting around and around, seemingly spewing out air into the world. And out of the hole came the form of Toby. You need not concern yourself, Naruto, the masked member of the Akatsuki said as he stood on the ground, facing the blonde. I am here. Have you come to give yourself to us? He snorted in derision. You wish. I'm just here to kill you, he declared as he reached into the pack. And to also give these back to you. He pulled a bundle of cloth and dropped it on the ground, making a large, metal crash. Both Toby and Zetsu stared at the bundle as it landed on the ground and inadvertently revealed its contents. 6 headbands with the symbol of Amigakure scratched across lay on the bundle, some were specked with dried blood. The meaning was clear, Pain was dead. How is this possible? The snarling voice, seemingly coming from Zetsu, demanded. He made the mistake of coming after me when I was angry, Naruto answered, remembering how it ended. Flashback. The surrounding area had been damaged by the fight, short and brutal that it was. 5 of the 6 Pains lay dead around the place, their headbands already taken from them. All that was left was the spiky-haired pain, who lay against the trunk of a tree, unable to move. How could this happen? He asked, staring up at the person who had defeated him. You can thank Jiraiya for it, Naruto answered, holding his Zanpakuto, back in its sealed state, in both hands. When he noticed that the pains were twitching, the bald pain a bit more than the rest of them, he figured that something was going on with them. When the bald pain began to spasm and make random movements, he remembered what Jiraiya had said about the poison. He connected the dots when he began to see the other pains spasm as well, that they all shared the same chakra, and that chakra was now killing them. It was a huge factor in the blonde's favor, helping him win the fight. Are you going to kill this pain? The spiky-haired pain asked, his eyes flickering down at himself. I've already killed the other 5, why would I stop with you? He asked back, raising his Zanpakuto into a stance that was ideal for stabbing. As he was about to make the killing thrust, a hail of paper shuriken flew at him, forcing him to leap back. When the hail died, Conan, who had been ordered to stay out of the fight, stood between the two. I guess you want to die too? But what happened instead surprised him. She fell to her knees and bowed her head, touching it to the ground. Please let me take him home, she begged. Don't mutilate him like you did the others. The other pains were missing limbs or even their heads, a sign to how vicious Naruto was when he fought against them. After a stunned moment of silence, he spoke. Why should I? He's already dying, she began. He's a puppet, why would you care? He asked, cutting her off. He remembered from Iruka's lessons, on a rare day when he had been paying attention, that no 2 chakras had the same signature. If there was such a case, then one of the 2 people who had them was a puppet. He's more than a puppet to me, she shouted at him, raising her head to look him in the eye, her emotionless mask breaking. He's not Pain, he's Yahiko and Nagato. Conan, enough, the spiky-haired Pain ordered, his monotone voice never changing. She turned slightly to look back at him, a tear glistening in the corner of her eye. Then she turned her head back to Naruto and bowed it again. Please, I'm begging you. Let me take him back. Let me care for them until they finally pass away. Silence ran paramount through the forest after she begged him for that favor. She kept her head bowed, not daring to look up. Finally, she heard the sound of his feet walking past her, a sound that filled her with despair, along with the sound of a sword being shifted in the hands that held it. The feet stopped walking, and the few seconds that followed felt like a lifetime to her. But the sound that came next confused her, as it wasn't the sound of a head being decapitated. It was the sound of a cloth being cut. When it stopped, the feet started up again, only to stop when they sounded like they were directly in front of her. She raised her head and saw that they were in front of her, making her look up all the way to his face. For the sake of the sensei who taught us both, I am willing to be merciful, Naruto began. I will grant you your wish. You may take that pain back to Amigekyo and care for it, and its puppet master until they die. But let me be very clear about this. He lowered himself so that they were eye to eye. You will never leave Amigekyo again. If I hear a single whisper of a rumor that you have done so, I will find you and I will kill you. Are we clear? She said nothing in response. She only nodded her head in agreement. He stood back up and walked away, leaping into the surrounding forest and leaving them behind. End flashback. Toby looked from the bundle back up to Naruto. Most impressive, Naruto, he finally said, keeping a neutral tone. It seems that I was mistaken in believing you would surrender yourself when we met again. If you wanted that to happen, you shouldn't have killed Jiraiya or sent Pain after me for a 3rd time, he replied shortly, gripping the Zanpakuto at his side a little tighter. I did not give any such orders to Pain. It was likely that he was acting on his own for the benefit of this organization. But that does not matter now. He shrugged his shoulders. I suppose this is where we start this fight you want so much? Not just yet. The blonde held his hand up in a stopping gesture. There is one more thing. And what is that? Kakashi wanted me to give these to you. He pulled out the goggles he had been carrying since he left the village and tossed them at the masked shinobi. He caught them with ease. For a moment of silence, he just stared at them. So he discovered the truth, did he? He asked himself, rubbing a thumb against the glass. Tell me, Naruto. Did Kakashi tell you who I was when he gave these to you? All he said was that he knew you once, he answered shortly. That would be true, and so have you. You lie. He knew that he had never met Toby before the mission to the capital. I do not. We met before. Granted, you were a newborn and I was threatening to kill you so I could get a hold of your mother, but the fact remains, the masked shinobi said casually, like he was talking about something that didn't really matter. What? Oh? They didn't tell you that your mother was the previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi? He asked, almost sounding like he was disappointed. The fox told me that, the blonde answered him, still not believing a word of what he said. Did he also tell you that I was the one who extracted him from your mother and set him on Konoha? That he did not, Naruto answered honestly. Why did you not tell me this, furball? He asked the Kyuubi. That night is still a bit of a blur for me, Gaki, the Biju answered. 1 minute, I'm sealed inside your mother. The next thing I know, there are a couple blurry images, some screaming, and before I know it, I'm sealed inside you. I thought he hadn't, Toby continued, ignorant of the conversation the Biju and Jinchuriki just had. But it still happened. You could almost say that I am the reason you are a Jinchuriki, Naruto. A dark chuckle escaped from behind the mask. I wonder what my old sensei would have said if he had known that before he died. Then again, I also wonder what he would say if he knew who he had been fighting that. He was silent for a moment before shrugging his shoulders carelessly. It doesn't matter. As for your fight, Naruto, I'm afraid that I must decline. He turned his back and started walking away. Zetsu, take him alive. You got it, both voices said in unison, leaping for the blonde. The masked shinobi kept on walking, until he heard the sound of 2 bodies hitting the ground with a meaty thud. Zetsu had been bisected and Naruto stood over the 2 pieces, the sword drawn and dripping blood. Seriously? Asked the blonde. That's all you were going to have me fight? He flicked the blood off of his sword, splattering it on the ground, before sheathing it. When Toby looked upon the blade, he was suddenly reminded of the day he heard that sound of a bell ringing in the air that soon faded into an echo. Whatever he felt was eclipsed by what he saw. The Geto Mazo had opened all its eyes and howled into the air. It had raised all the hair he had, and the unnerving thing? The howl sounded like a challenge to the bell. Perhaps it was rather rude of me to think capturing you would be that easy, the masked shinobi admitted, slipping his hands into a hand seal. Thankfully, I have a backup. The ground seemed to quake for a moment. Then, once it had stopped, creatures began to rise up from the ground. They turned out to be copies of Zetsu, with the major differences being they were completely white and had none of the Venus flytrap the original had. Don't kill him, we need him alive, he ordered the army of Zetsu clones before turning back around and leaving. As the clones began to move forward and encircle the blonde, he only smirked in response. That wouldn't be a good idea, he told them. If I were you all, I would turn around and walk away. And why should we? One of the clones in the front asked him. It's clear that we have the advantage over you. That would be quantity or quality, and personally, I always believe that a healthy mixture of both will trump either one of them, he replied as he shifted the pack off of his back, letting it hit the ground. It would have been extra weight soon and he didn't need it. He pulled his Zanpakuto out, sheath and all, and held it out in front of him. The expression on his face went flat as he grasped the hilt. Shatter the chains that bind you and stand in defiance against those who would shackle you, he intoned as he slowly drew the Zanpakuto out. Jinchuriki. As the blade was about to clear the sheath, the entire thing morphed. Instead of a sword, he now held a naginata. Its shaft was made of black wood that had both ends of the pole capped in gold. Attached to one end of the pole was the figure of an orange fox's head, mouth agape and almost carved as a snarl. Protruding from its mouth the blade was the blade of the weapon, having a curved edge. Pierced into the bottom of the blade, so they hung around the fox's lower jaw, were 9 golden rings. But Naruto didn't stop there. While still holding the halberd, he crossed his fingers into a familiar hand seal and said Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 8 copies came into existence, carrying the same weapon. The difference was that instead of having a fox's head and 9 rings, the other 8 each had a different head that represented a Biju and the rings that corresponded to the number of tails it had. From the figure of a tanuki's head and its 1 ring to the figure of a bull's head and its 8 rings. Despite the fact that they all felt the same feeling of uncertainty and unease when looking at the transformed weapon, one of Zetsu scoffed. Is that supposed to fright? It began to ask with a sneer on its face, only to have it turn to shock when a bolt of lightning punched a hole through its chest and caused it to collapse to the ground. The rest of the clones looked in the direction where the bolt originated and saw the Naginata with the bull's head had lightning crackling at its tip. Yes, the original Naruto simply answered as the other 7 Naginatas came alive. The first had sand float around the blade. The second blade was wreathed in blue fire. The third blade was encased in water. The fourth blade had a ring of lava circling it. The fifth blade had small rocks orbiting it. The sixth blade had what looked to be slime glistening down in rivulets. And the seventh blade had a cone of spiraling air cocooned around it. Out of all of them, only the ninth blade, the one which the original held, had nothing. The 8 clones leveled their version of the Zanpakuto and attacked while the original just stood there and watched in silence. Despite the clear numerical advantage the clones had, it was soon rendered moot by the way the clones fought. Some of them were graceful, looking like they were dancing, and some were crude, more direct and to the point. But all of them were vicious and deadly, and the elements they bore added to the effect. Even with more and more Zetsu clones rising from the ground, whole swaths were demolished. Some choked to death as the sand filled through their throats, while others suffocated when the air was pulled out of them. What seemed to be slime on the Naginata with the figure of a slug's head turned out to be acidic, and was quite corrosive, if the wounds inflicted on the clones and their screams were anything to go by. Both the blue fire and the lava killed several of the clones, burning them alive. The Naginata with the figure of a dolphin horse head crushed several clones' heads with boulders and also sent them falling into fissures formed when the blade struck the earth. And the lightning from the 8th version electrocuted clones, killing them in an instant. Toby, who had stopped in front of the entrance to the caves and had turned back around at the sounds of fighting, just watched. He didn't do anything or say anything. He just observed how the massive clone army he had been preparing ever since the Akatsuki had captured their first Jinchuriki getting torn to shreds. "Are you afraid to fight for yourself, Naruto?" he asked, finally breaking his silence. "I am fighting," the clone holding the 7th version answered, spinning the Naginata around and around, sending clones flying into the air from the wind created by the spinning. "I mean the original you. The one who hasn't moved since this fight has begun," he clarified, gesturing to the original Naruto, who hadn't moved from the spot he stood on. Every time a Zetsu clone tried to get to him, one of the copies would double back and stop it. While he acted, nothing happened. "They seem to be doing just fine," the original stated, looking at his clones. The reinforcements of the Zetsu clones had been getting slower until it had finally stopped. The rest of the clones were being taken care of. "But perhaps you're right. I think the number has been whittled down enough." His clones disappeared in plumes of smoke, leaving him alone against the remnants of the Zetsu clones. "Ha, that was a mistake you're going to regret making," one of the clones told him in a triumphant voice. "I wouldn't be so sure of that," he replied, casually lowering the Naginata until its tip was pointing directly at them. "You've seen what the other versions can do, but you haven't seen this version. The Kyuubi is the strongest of the 9 Biju. Would you like to know what element was chosen to represent him?" "What?" asked another clone. "Energy," he answered with an almost feral grin as the blade seemed to pulse and turn to a reddish color, almost the same color of the fox's chakra. Pure. Unrefined. Power. What happened next was completely different from before. However crude or graceful the previous versions were, there was a sense of style to them. There was no style to how he wielded the Naginata. He swung it like it was a club. But the effect was the same. Wherever the club was swung, the Zetsu clones were sent flying back or mere plowed over, crushed by the massive force that was bent from the Naginata. Whole chunks of the clones were destroyed just being struck. "Run for your life!" one of the outermost clones screamed, as the fringes began to run away. But that particular clone was beheaded by Toby, who wielded a sickle in his right hand that had a chain attached to the bottom of its shaft. "You will fight, or you will die," the masked shinobi ordered the rest of the Zetsu clones, taking hold of the chain and began to swing the sickle. "It's your choice." "That's hardly a choice," another clone protested. But before Toby could decapitate that one, it was crushed by the force, head bursting as it fell to the ground. "I happened to be talking to that one, Naruto," the Akatsuki member said aloud, looking at the carnage. "It's rather rude to kill someone when they're in the middle of a conversation." "Like he actually cares about something like that," the blonde said in derision as he swung the Naginata again, sending a group of Zetsu clones flying through the air. The remaining clones were getting fewer and fewer as he kept on destroying them. Some tried to fight back, a few fusing together to make a bigger, mutated version. But Naruto's response was to put truth in the old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Moving the Naginata in a thrusting position, he sent the mutated version flying through the air, its chest crushed instantly. As it slammed into the ground, it broke apart into bloody pieces. Gruesome, Kyubi idly commented. Your color commentary is not needed right now, his Jinchuriki told him before refocusing on the fight. The rest of the Zetsu clones fought with desperate energy, trying to surround him and take him down all at the same time. That was their fatal mistake. He simply swung his weapon in a circle, and they were all crushed by the pressure of the force. He was not alone. Looking over at where Toby had supposedly been standing, he saw that the masked shinobi was now gone. Not wanting to let him get away, the blonde charged directly into the entrance to the caves. "Get back here, Toby!" he shouted into the semi-darkness, running through it. "I'm not going anywhere, Naruto," Toby's voice echoed around him as chakra lanterns illuminated the area. It showed the shinobi standing in front of the statue that could only be the Gedo Mazo. The sickle was still in his right hand. "I just figured we needed more room." "How considerate of you," the blonde replied sarcastically. A quiet chuckle escaped from the mask. "My old sensei also had a sense of sarcasm, although it wasn't as sharp as yours. He used it more to poke gentle fun at others." "You keep talking about your sensei like I should have known him," he noted, staring at the orange mask like he was trying to reveal its secrets. "You would have, had I not deprived you of the chance," Toby answered. "Well, I should say the Kyubi deprived you of the chance, but I released it in the first place. So, I deprived you." He suddenly laughed when he saw the frown on Naruto's face. "That's the same frown he wore whenever he had to separate me and Kakashi when we came to blows." Multiple things clicked into place with those words. A vague memory came to mind, becoming clearer and sharper as he remembered. It was a memory of before Sasuke had tried to run away, when he was a member of Team Kakashi. One of them, he forgot who exactly, had asked Kakashi how he got the Sharingan for a left eye, and he told them the story. "You're him, aren't you?" he asked aloud. "You're the person Hataki's left eye belongs to. You used to be his teammate. You're Obito Uchiha." Whatever laughter he had left vanished when he heard those words. Nothing but silence ran rampant through the cave for a good 2 minutes before he finally spoke. "Kakashi told you the story," he stated, not asking a question. "He did, a few years ago," the Fire Paragon replied. "You look quite alive for a dead man. And I thought you would ask why I hadn't returned to the village. If I was loyal to the village, I might have. But I'm not, so I won't. The question I have is that now I know who you are you still going to keep wearing that mask?" Again, he was silent. But he released his grip on the sickle, reached up, and pulled the mask off. The right side of his face was scarred in such a way that it looked heavily wrinkled. It was the only thing that visibly showed what happened to that side of his body. Other than that, he looked normal, even though his skin was a bit pale. What had surprised Naruto was that his left eye wasn't an empty socket. There was a Sharingan in it as well. "Like what you see?" the unmasked Uchiha asked. "Whose eye is that?" Naruto asked, pointing at the left eye with the Naginata. "It doesn't matter. Just like my name doesn't matter, despite what you might think," he stated, chucking the mask away and grabbing the chain attached to the sickle. "Obito does not exist anymore." "Is that right?" "Yes, it is." "Then why are you still holding the goggles?" The Naginata shifted its tip to the goggles held in his left hand. He looked down at them and saw that his thumb had been idly rubbing the lens. Wordlessly, he dropped them to the ground and stepped on them. The glass cracking was the answer he gave. He began to spin the sickle around and around. When he charged at Naruto, he swung the chain, sending the sickle flying at the blonde. The Naginata shifted into the 7th version. Naruto spun it around, bending a shield of air that the sickle bounced off of harmlessly. While still moving the Zanpakuto, he caused it to shift into the 2nd version and bent an arc of blue fire at his opponent. When Obito went through the fire, phasing past the fire and the heat, he shifted the Naginata into the 5th version and struck the ground, bending up a small barrier of earth to protect him from his opponent. "Is that supposed to stop me, Naruto?" Obito asked as he threw the sickle around the barrier from one side and let it hit the other while moving through the earth. He saw that the blonde had kept the chain from restricting him by using the shaft of his Naginata. However, that caused him to turn his back to the barrier. "I have him," the Akatsuki member thought in triumph as he reached out and grabbed the blonde's shoulder, only to have it disappear in a cloud of smoke. A Kagebunshin? On instinct, he stayed intangible. That instinct saved him, as Naruto descended from above with the Naginata in the 8th version. He tried to pierce the former Uchiha with a lightning-encased tip, only to go through him and hit the ground, causing web-like cracks to be created. Once he realized that it didn't work, he rolled out of Obito and shifted the Zanpakuto into the 4th version, encasing him in a cooling cocoon of lava. Please tell me what got him, he mentally prayed. I think you know the answer to that, the fox replied. Again, color commentary, not needed now. For a second, he had hoped to think that it had worked, only to have that hope dashed when Obito walked through the cooling lava. He didn't say anything. He charged at Naruto again, sickle in hand. Shifting the Zanpakuto into the 6th version, the blonde met him, crashing his weapon against the sickle. He almost lost his balance when the Zanpakuto suddenly went through the sickle and its wielder, taking him with it. But he stopped by thrusting the blade of the Naginata into the ground. Bringing the rest of his body out of his opponent, which felt a little weird, he quickly whipped them back across and managed to knock Obito to the ground. Trying to take advantage of what happened, he pulled the Zanpakuto out of the ground and swung down at the Akatsuki member, bringing a trail of corrosive acid with it. But it again struck ground, as Obito seemingly melted through the ground. Where'd he go? Naruto silently demanded as he looked around, trying to keep an alert lookout. Does it look like I know? Kyubi asked him. For the love of everything holy and sacred underneath the gaze of Kami, will you stop talking? He bellowed at the Biju. Ah, you don't need to shout, the fox complained, wincing as the roar kept ringing in his ears. Fine, I'll stop talking. Thank you. By the way, look down. What? He did look down and saw Obito's hand coming out of the ground at him. He tried to get back, but the hand was too fast and grabbed hold of his upper leg. I would have thought Kakashi would have taught you to remember to look down, Obito commented as he came out of the ground. It was a mistake that has cost you. I won. The air began to distort itself around his right eye, drawing towards it. Unable to do anything, the blonde was sucked into the distortion, disappearing into the eye. As he captured Naruto, the Akatsuki member noticed the smile on his face and saw his mouth think again. A little confused by that, as his Sharingan was able to read lips perfectly, he wondered what that meant. There's nothing he can do now, I have him, he thought. Then he realized something. Unless he didn't make just one Kagebunshin. A blaze of blue fire sailing through the air and towards answered that question. He tried to suck the fire into his eye, only to be surprised to see it move out of the path of his eye while still in the air. He tried to get out of its path, but was only partly successful as it grazed his left arm and gave him a burn. He did teach me to always look down, Naruto's voice answered him as the blonde walked back into his view, the Naginata in its 2nd version. I was counting on you to do the same thing. You wanted one of those clones to be touched by me, he accused his opponent, his breath coming out in a hiss due to the burn. You must go somewhere when you disappear, and I bet it has something to do with that right eye of yours. So I let you take a clone, just to see where he would end up. He calmed himself down and looked at the blonde. Nothing showed on his face, and neither did his eyes. You are becoming an annoyance, he declared. I'll take that as a compliment, Naruto replied, shifting the Zanpakuto into the 5th version and sending rocks flying at him. He simply stood there and let the rocks fly through him. But he did flinch and grabbed his shoulder as blood leaked fast down his hand. That's weird. All the rocks went right through him. Katon, go Kakyu no Jutsu! Shouted Obito as he flipped through hand seals and breathed out a fireball. It went flying towards Naruto. But he blocked it by shifting his Zanpakuto into the 3rd version and bending a shield of water against the fireball. Thrusting the Naginata forward once the fireball had dissipated, he bent the water into a torrent and sent it straight at Obito. It went right through him, even as the blonde kept it up and made it bigger, until it covered all of him. When he tried to move away from the water, Naruto stayed with him. When he finally let it stop, Obito didn't look any worse for the wear, except for the fact that his cloak had multiple cuts in it. The water didn't do that, Naruto thought. So what did? As if to answer the question, memories began to flood his mind. He winced at first, then he smiled. I've got you now, he declared in silent triumph. Obito, not being one to wait, swung the sickle again. This time, he tried something different. Ducking to avoid the sickle itself, he reached out and grabbed hold of the chain. He pulled hard, hard enough to send his opponent flying. And fly he did. Obito hadn't expected the chain to be grabbed or for it to be pulled. He was lifted up into the air and sent flying. When he saw the Naginata pointing straight at him, he had no choice. He allowed himself to pass through the Naginata and through. But even as he passed through them and touched the ground safely, he let out a scream of pain and covered his left eye. There was a deep enough of a gash through the eye itself to render it useless, and making him blind on his left side. "I guess that means it worked," he heard Naruto speak from behind him. "What do you mean?" he demanded, spinning around. Blood oozed between his fingers as he continued to hold his eye. "I figured out how that little intangible trick of yours works. You don't turn intangible at all, do you? You just move your body to a different dimension," the blonde accused him. He briefly wondered how his opponent knew that. Then he realized that the clone had kept attacking him whenever he had slipped into the other dimension. It was why he kept moving around when the torrent of water was striking him. He was trying to avoid the attacks of the clone. It didn't really work, if the cuts on his cloak were anything to go by. "You certainly do know how to use clones." "They're what got me to become a shinobi," Naruto replied. "And now, you can't try to phase through me or my attacks, otherwise you'll be attacked by my clone in the other dimension. The playing field has been leveled." He was silent for a moment. Then he took off the cloak of the Akatsuki, not caring if it was being torn in the process, and dropped it onto the floor. "Very well, Naruto," he said as he unwrapped the chain the sickle was attached to. It had been wrapped around his waist. "If you wish to fight on a so-called leveled playing field, I shall indulge you." He began to swing the sickle and the end of the chain around and around. "But do not think that just because you can hit me, it means I am any less dangerous." The blonde's reply was to shift his Zanpakuto into the first version and tried to cover him in sand. He leapt high and swung the sickle down. Naruto bent the sand into a shield, stopping the sickle. But as he dropped it, Obito came in with a flying kick. It caught him square in the chest, making him fall down to the ground loudly. As he regained his bearings, he saw the sickle coming down. He wasn't sure where it was going to strike, but he didn't know if Obito simply wanted to contain him or tried to kill him now. Not wanting to find out, he shifted his Zanpakuto into the 7th version and managed to knock the sickle aside. He saw the end of the chain swinging in and rolled out of the way, letting it strike the ground. Standing up and shifting his Zanpakuto into the 6th version, he swung high, corrosive acid glistening on the blade. Obito saw the incoming strike before it happened and quickly sidestepped, allowing it to hit the ground. Sickle in hand, he swung for the blonde's shoulder, intent on disabling him. Naruto saw the sickle incoming. Taking one hand off of his weapon, he quickly pulled out a kunai and blocked it. Sparks flew off of the two blades as they grated against each other. The fight stalled as the two combatants tried to push through the other's defense. That is, until they both tried to kick the feet out from under the other. Their kicks met in midair, and the air around them resounded with the sound of them meeting. They broke off and leapt back away from each other. "Futon, Shinken," Naruto said, doing the hand seals while his hands were full, thus making it take a little longer. He breathed the wind onto the kunai, sharpening it and lengthening it as well. Once it was ready, he threw it straight at Obito. The member of the Akatsuki took hold of the middle section of the chain and held it out in the path of the kunai. When metal struck metal, he twisted the chain off to the side, sending the kunai flying away. But it had cut through the chain itself, leaving him with only half the length. Not one to be deterred, Obito grabbed the shortened end of the chain and began to swing the sickle like a flail. He stepped towards Naruto, who shifted his Zanpakuto into the 2nd version and began spinning it around, bending blue fire. He used the fire to try and keep his opponent away from him. The sickle was coming in hard and fast, whistling through the air and seemingly cutting the arcs of blue flame in half. And yet, Obito was slow to press forward. He knew that the closer he got, the less room he had to use the sickle as a flail. Whilst his opponent wouldn't have such a problem, granted, he could grab the sickle by the handle when he got closer, but that would take precious seconds, and if he miscalculated, Naruto would press his advantage. The fire and the sickle continued to duel each other, their wielders always taking a step forward or a step back. It almost looked like they were dancing a very dangerous dance. Their faces were locked in equal expressions of concentration. Naruto finally took a chance after they had gone on like that for too long, at least, in his opinion. He shifted his Zanpakuto into the 4th version and swung high from below, lava trailing behind in an arc. While the blade didn't hit the sickle, the lava certainly did. It momentarily covered the sickle, and that was all the blonde needed. He bent the lava to cool and then to slam into the ground. As it broke apart, so did the sickle with it. The metal shattered and the pieces skidded all across the ground. The shaft of the sickle was charred and looked half melted. When Obito pulled the chain back to him, half of the shaft broke off and stayed on the ground. He took off the other half and began swinging the chain again. He swung it at Naruto. Despite losing the sickle, it was still a weapon, and he was intent on using it. Naruto backed up as the chain swung in close, not letting it get close to him. Even without the sickle, the chain was a deadly weapon if used properly, and Obito knew how to use it properly. The whistling the chain made as it swung through the air was enough to pierce the ears of anyone who left them unprotected. But as the blonde had the goggles over his ears, it was enough to dull the sound. Shifting his Zanpakuto into the 6th version, he began to attack the chain, striking the end with corrosive acid. The sparks flew again as the Naginata and the chain struck each other. Link by link, the chain was slowly melting each time it was hit by the acid. But even though that was happening, Naruto was getting impatient. "This is taking too long," he mentally growled as he knocked the chain away, corroding the next link away. "Well, aren't you going to do something about it?" the fox asked, half sarcastic and half serious. "No, I just thought I would plan on where to take Azula out next time," he replied, completely sarcastic. When the chain swung at him again, he didn't knock it away. Instead, he ducked and let it pass over his head. As it curved back around, it used the Naginata's shaft to do so. Seeing his chance, Naruto stood back up and spun the Naginata, wrapping the chain around it. Then he yanked hard. Obito had no desire to go flying again, so he let go of the chain. As the chain flew straight at him, the blonde spun the Zanpakuto in the other direction, freeing the end of the chain on the shaft. Once it was done, he stepped off to the side and let it go right past him. He then shifted his Zanpakuto into the 9th version and stabbed the air, bending the force at the chain. The impact caused the chain to completely shatter, the fragments embedding themselves into the nearby floor and wall. Trying to press his advantage, Naruto charged straight at his opponent. However, Obito had thought of the same thing, now that both his sickle and chain had been destroyed. The two of them clashed again. Even though he was weaponless, Obito was a master at taijutsu and still had a Sharingan to use. But the effect was only half as effective, due to the fact that his left eye had been all but destroyed, leading him to be blind on that side. Naruto kept trying to take advantage of that weakness by continually moving into that blind spot. Obito could still see him do it before he actually did because of his remaining Sharingan, and reacted accordingly. He also prevented the blonde from the full use of his Naginata by keeping close and making him use it only for defense. As the fight went on, Naruto began to tire. Continually usage of his Zanpakuto was wearing down on him. He was still unused to it, and that was becoming a liability. He needed to figure out a way to finish the fight. "Your strikes are getting slower, Naruto," Obito noted as he threw a kick at the blonde's midsection. "Are you getting tired?" He blocked the kick with the Naginata's shaft. "Don't think you can take me out easily," he replied with an almost growl. He tried using the other end of his Zanpakuto to knock the Uchiha's feet out from under him. "I have never done so," the Akatsuki member replied, bringing his arm down to block the shaft. His opponent tried to take the opportunity to move into his blind side, but he followed with him. "But you are tiring. I can see it in how you move and how you fight." "I can still beat you," the blonde promised him. He couldn't help but laugh at that. "Have you been deluding yourself into thinking that you could?" "I don't think so. I know I can and will beat you." He swung the Naginata from high, trying to cleave Obito in two. But the man simply spun to the side, letting the blade strike the ground and cause a crater. "You have been deluding yourself," the Akatsuki member said in quiet satisfaction. "You actually thought that you could defeat me and claim victory. How incredibly naive of you, Naruto." He threw a punch that got through, striking the blonde's side. He hissed in pain as he felt the pain of the fist. "That's probably going to crack one of my ribs," the fire paragon noted to himself. "How naive is naivety to think I could beat you?" he demanded, still continuing the fight. He tried to get past his opponent's guard, but nothing seemed to get through. "Simple facts," Obito answered. "You may have served in a war, I will grant you that. But so I have. I have not survived this long because I was very lucky. I studied, I trained, and I learned. I am better than you, Naruto, both mentally and physically. You lack the experience, or the training to actually have a chance against me. He dodged a jab from the Naginata. I don't believe that. You can't use your little trick to help you in this fight. Which I have admitted is quite impressive of you. But just because you've done one thing to me doesn't change the outcome. You thought you could win against me, but all you have actually done is just wear yourself down, he stated as he ducked under the Naginata's swipe. That's not true. I can beat you, he would beat his opponent. He had to beat his opponent. If he lost, leaving Konoha and his friends behind would have been completely pointless. He had to keep going, to succeed in this fight. But even as the blows were parried and blocked, as the strikes and kicks kept coming and going, he began to feel more and more tired. His attacks were becoming slower and weaker. Obito saw this and took advantage. He lunged in and began a vicious assault. Naruto tried to defend himself against it, but when he had been forced to drop his Zanpakuto to catch a kick, that was when it was over for him. He tried to keep his defense up, but it was torn apart by a barrage of punches and kicks. Pain came at him from every part of his body each time he was struck. In the end, he wasn't sure what it was that finished him. Maybe it was the punch to the shoulder or the knee to his stomach. But he hit the ground face first. This fight is over, Obito declared, standing over him. As Naruto lay there, his body in considerable pain and his mind almost overloading from it, he somehow heard those words. Over? He asked himself. No, it can't be over. I have to win. I have to beat him. Pushing past the pain, he reached out and grabbed his Zanpakuto. I have to win. He tried to stand up. It's over, Naruto, his opponent told him. He refused to believe that. No, not done, he rasped as he forced himself to get on his knees. What was that? I am not done, he answered, lifting himself up into a kneeling position. Every muscle in his body ached as he did this, but he couldn't stop there. He reached for his chakra and felt it flicker. I didn't hear you, the Uchiha said, confusion evident on his face. I'm not done, he repeated, his chakra getting stronger and stronger. Its blue energy began to show itself over his body. I'm not done, he said again, letting his chakra flow through his body and letting him forget the pain that riddled him. His refusal to stay down, his will to win, and basic desperation were enough to finally bring his chakra out in full force, bathing him in a blue inferno. I'm not done! He roared into Obito's face. His chakra flared up in response to what he felt. It reached higher and higher as it began to look like creatures were trying to claw their way out. It soon became evident that those creatures were dragons, and when they did finally form themselves, taking all of the chakra off of the blonde, there were 9 of them looming over him. Having seen what came next, Obito tried to get to safety. But he couldn't turn himself intangible. He wasn't sure if the clone was still there waiting for him, so he tried to turn and run. But the first dragon had already lunged and grabbed hold of him. There was nothing he could do, he was trapped. Naruto leapt at his trapped target and began the barrage. 9 punches, 9 kicks, and 9 strikes from his Zanpakuto he gave to Obito before the dragon tossed the trapped Uchiha for the next dragon to grab him. The blonde held nothing back, pouring everything he had into the barrage. His Zanpakuto shifted versions with each dragon, adding the element that they carried. When the 8th dragon had done its turn, it threw Obito up into the air. The 9th dragon flew up after him and encircled him, while Naruto leapt up and off of it to reach his target. He delivered 26 blows, flying through the air and then leaping off of the dragon. For the 27th, he leapt into the air, flying higher and higher. Once he reached the zenith, he looked down at his target and drew back his fist. He fell towards Obito, channeling his chakra into his fist. Tenryurai no Hoko! He shouted, slamming his fist into the Uchiha's stomach. The chakra flowed through his fist, taking the form of the 10th and last dragon, whose majestic and regal look was the reason for the name. It clamped its teeth onto the Uchiha and flew straight at the ground, smashing into it. The sound of the crash reverberated throughout the cave. When Naruto landed on the ground, he found Obito lying in a very shallow crater, whether that because it was very hard rock underneath or he simply didn't have enough to make the 15-inch crater. The blonde didn't care at that point. He limped over to the fallen Uchiha, his chakra fading away. Once he stood over his opponent, he raised his Zanpakuto and stabbed the man in the heart. Any last words? He asked as he held the Naginata down. Obito was in pain, complete and utter pain. At some point in the barrage, he had been blinded in his right eye too. He knew he was dying, even before he felt the Naginata pierce his heart. But he felt his life fading away, and even though he should have only seen darkness, the last thing he could see was her. Rin, he said in a whisper, trying to raise a hand to reach out to her. That whisper was his last, and that hand never rose. Once he was sure the man was dead, Naruto pulled his Zanpakuto out of Obito's chest. It morphed back into the form of a katana. He walked away from the body for a few steps before his legs gave away and he fell to his knees. I did it, he said in wonder, like he couldn't believe it. I killed him. Everyone in the known Akatsuki is dead. For some reason, he began to laugh. The job's done. We can go now. It's over. He almost couldn't believe the words, but they were true. It was over. He stayed there for a while, just relishing the fact that it was all over. When the pain began to fade away, he stood back up on shaky legs. I guess it's time to leave, he said to himself, still trying to make sure he didn't fall down again. You do realize that you're a dead man once Azula gets her hands on you, the Kyuubi pointed out. He smiled. I know. I'm looking forward to it. The ground shook suddenly, almost making him lose his balance again. When he steadied himself, he looked around to see what had happened. When he looked upon the Gedomazo, he saw that all the eyes were open, but only 8 had pupils. Then he noticed that those 8 pupils were looking straight at him, and the arms were reaching for him. As Naruto slowly came back to a conscious state of mind, he felt sluggish. Huh! What happened? He felt like his brain was full of cobwebs. When he tried to open his eyes, it was like they wouldn't. When he was able to crack them open an inch, there was what felt like 2 spears trying to stab them. He instantly closed them again, regretting his decision. Bad idea, that was a bad idea. He chanted as he rocked back and forth. Will you stop that, you fool? A familiar voice asked. You look like you're cannonballing into a pool. When those words and that voice floated into his ears, he stopped rocking and slowly opened his eyes, trying carefully to get used to the blinding light. When they finally adjusted, they widened in surprise as they were in front of him. B? He asked, not entirely believing it. But the Kumo shinobi was right there before him, both of them standing in a white void. Who else would it be? The Jinchuriki of the Hachibi asked back. There's only one killer bee and that would be me, the top cheese. I thought you didn't like cheese, the voice of a woman commented as one appeared by his side. She wasn't taller than him, but she was able to look him in the eye without lifting her head. Her long blonde hair was held in a ponytail against her back. She wore a black and purple shirt as well as black pants. The headband of Kumogakure was somewhat hidden underneath her hair, but it was still visible. Come on, Yujito. I was just trying to make a point, you know? Fool, you fool. Her eyes went flat and hard. B, what have I told you about rapping or calling me a fool? She asked with a tone that promised something painful if he didn't answer correctly. Which was why Naruto wasn't really surprised as he watched the Raikage's brother be cowed. That you would geld me with your nails if I did it again, he muttered, not wanting to maintain eye contact. He even flinched when his eyes gazed at her nails. Glad to see you remembered. She looked over at Naruto, who was still staring at them both. So, you're the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, she stated, looking him over. Can't say I'm impressed. That snapped Naruto out of his silence. And who the hell are you again? The name's Yujito ni, she introduced herself. I was the Jinchuriki of the Nibi. He looked at her closely. Can't say I'm impressed, he finally said, throwing her words right back at her. She gave a feral grin. I think you and I will get along just fine. It took me 4 years and 12 rounds of ass-whooping for you to say that to me, B said, almost sulkily. She threw him a vaguely annoyed look. B, that was more than 18 years ago. Get over it, she told him. I see you guys are having fun, a man's voice said. When Naruto looked over to his left, where the voice had come from, his eyes widened again. You two are here as well? He said in surprise, looking at the 2 Jinchuriki from IWA. I am Han, he is Rashi, the taller of the 2 told him, gesturing first to himself, then to his companion. He was differently dressed than in the photo, but it was still the same person. How do you know us, kid? Rashi asked him with a slight frown. I saw a picture of you two with Itsutsuki when I was in IWA. You're the Jinchuriki of the Gobi and he's the Jinchuriki of the Gobi. Yeah, well, that's not entirely true, the redhead muttered. Before Naruto could ask him what he meant by that, someone else joined them. Hey, is the new guy up yet? A darkly tanned girl with an orange clip in her light green hair asked, standing beside B. What she wore probably would have made the ladies in Ba Sing Se look at her in distaste for showing her stomach and legs off like that. Then again, Naruto had always thought Ba Sing Se ladies were prudes. Her orange eyes were alight with curiosity. Ask him yourself, Fu. He's right there, Yujito told her, pointing at the blonde. She turned her gaze on him and frowned. Why are you curled up in a ball? She all but demanded. Try standing, I'm sure you'll like it. That was when he realized that he was floating in midair, still in his rocking position. Oh, sorry about that, he apologized as he lowered his feet and found something solid to stand upon, even though he knew that there wasn't anything really solid for him to do. She smiled at him. That's better, right? Anyway, you've already heard my name. It's Fu and I was the Jinchuriki of Nanabai. And you're from Takigakure, right? She managed to look surprised by his observation. How did you know that? Naruto pulled his lips back into a small, dry smile. Your headband. He pointed at the headband in question, wrapped securely around her right arm. It was quite obvious for everyone to see. When she looked down at where his finger was pointing, she had the decency to blush. Oh, so it is. Someone get you by surprise again, Fu? A new voice asked her. It came from a young man that stood beside Han. He was a slim person, whose kimono was hung loose over his frame and allowed people to see some of his chest. He held a sort of pipe in his hand and a jug of bamboo was held in place against his chest by the kimono. His brown hair covered one of his eyes, but the other one wasn't, allowing people to see its pale gold iris. Just when she was about to turn and say something in reply, someone else did. Utakata, I thought you promised to stop saying things like that, a boy who stood next to Rashi said to him. Even though he looked like a boy, he spoke with a man's voice. There was a small smile on his face, which made the scar that trailed down from his left eye and looked stitched together move with it. His eyes were pink and had no pupils, and he had messy locks of light gray hair. He carried a pole-like weapon on his back. He also promised to be more cheerful and upbeat, Fu replied. She crossed her arms and gave a huff, like she was annoyed with what Utakata was doing. The man in question just rolled his eyes. I am more cheerful and upbeat, he told her. But I know when the best time to be cheerful and upbeat is, and I can say that this isn't the right time. It doesn't look like that to me, she fired back. For the love of Kami, I would say that you're even more depressing than usual. Utakata, Fu, can we please not have this fight right now? We have a newcomer, after all, he turned to look at the newcomer. Greetings, Naruto Uzumaki. I am Yagura, the Yandere Mizukage, he introduced himself. I was the Jinchuriki of the Sanbai. The fellow in the blue kimono, as you already heard, is Utakata. He hails from Kuria as well. I was the Jinchuriki of the Rokubi, Utakata added. That's good to know, Naruto said, unsure of what to say. Once that had passed, he started counting. Aren't we missing someone? He only saw 8, counting himself. You are indeed, the voice of an old man answered his question. Turning his gaze, the blonde saw an old priest with a long beard standing before him. Hello, my name is Bunpuku. I was the Jinchuriki of Shikaku. I thought Gaara was the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. The priest wasn't offended by what the blonde said. He simply smiled. I was his predecessor. Oh, I see. It was the only thing he could really say. Trying to avoid an awkward moment, he looked around but all he saw a white void. So where exactly are we? You don't remember? Yagura asked him with a raised eyebrow. Hey, I had the same problem, Rashi reminded the Mizukage, looking at him with a pointed expression. Same goes for me, B added. And me, Fu chimed in. You were the same when you first arrived here, Bunpuku told him. Okay. I get the point, he snapped, a severe look of annoyance appearing on his face as he looked at all of them. Taking a deep breath to calm himself down, he looked back at Naruto. Try to remember what happened to you, he encouraged the blonde. I know what happened to me, he replied with a snappish tone. I had just killed Obito, and had walked a few steps away before falling to my knees. I was there for a couple of seconds when the Geto Mazo he trailed off, as he remembered what had exactly happened. The arms had grabbed hold of him and brought him closer and closer to the mouth until that damn thing ate me. Location: Team Avatar and Team Paragon. They weren't quite sure how it happened. One moment they were traveling when all of a sudden, the creature had, for lack of a better word, appeared. A brief moment of stunned wonder followed its appearance. Then it roared so loudly that the two teams almost felt their ears would burst. Appa and Fanning bellowed in pain at the roar and began to fall. Aang and Zuko were able to pull them up enough so they wouldn't crash directly into the ground. Instead, they skidded for a few feet before finally stopping, leaving a trail behind them. Appa, you okay, buddy? Aang asked his sky bison, concern and worry evident in his voice as he leapt off and landed on the ground. The bison gave the equivalent of a groan for an answer. Guys, I don't think that Appa will be able to get up into the air again, he told the others. We just need to give them a few minutes, Zuko told him, after just finishing a similar conversation with Fanning. They should get their bearings back after that. I don't think we have a few minutes, Sokka replied as he stared at the creature that towered over them. It had a muscle build to it, but the muscles themselves were uneven. Horns ringed the top of its head, but they were all uneven, in placement, and in length. It had arms and legs, but the thing that grabbed their attention was the 10 tails waving in the air behind it, and the single eye it had. It almost looked like a Sharingan, except for the fact it had more rings around it, and with those rings, more Tomo. Does anyone have any clue what that thing is? June demanded as she reined Nyla in. Her whip was out and ready to use, but she was not about to charge headfirst into a fight against something like that. I could be wrong, but I think that's a Biju, Suki answered her as she counted the tails it had. Aren't there only supposed to be 9 Biju? Katara asked her. The waterbender was swiftly checking both Appa and Fanning for any actual injuries. I thought so, but I'm counting 10 tails here, she replied, waving her hand in the direction of the creature. Does it really matter how many tails it has or whether or not it's a Biju? Toph asked them all. I can feel it coming straight at us. They could all feel the ground shaking as the creature made its way to them. Not knowing what else to do, they all prepare for battle. Ride the skies and roar fire, Soryu, Zuko declared, drawing his Zanpakuto, making them change into their Shirkai state. The right blade began to hum with the sound of fire, and the left blade began to crackle with the sound of lightning. Defend your kingdom of snow-covered forests, Kuroga, Sokka said, drawing his own Zanpakuto as it split into 2 blades. Suki drew her sword, realizing that her fans weren't going to really work against something like the creature, and activated the shield on her left bracer. Katara, Azula, and Toph settled into their respective stances and readied their elements. The only one who didn't do anything was Aang. When he finally looked at the creature, he froze. When the creature finally stopped and looked down at them, its eye was only focused on the Avatar and vice versa. Finally, what broke the silent staring contest was Aang, and what he did surprised everyone there. You, he said in a harsh snarl, his face taking on the same harshness. When he spoke, it wasn't with the voices of the past avatars. Instead, it was with one single voice, a deeper and rougher voice. The creature roared at him, and he roared in return, his eyes and tattoos glowing white as he went into the avatar state. They all just watched as he bent a large column of fire and threw directly at the creature, slamming it into its side. He then leapt into the air and bent a sphere of air around him. Once that was done, he flew directly at the creature. Is that normal for him? June asked after a few moments of stunned silence. No, Katara answered as she watched her boyfriend attack the creature with all 4 of the elements. It was almost like watching a fly attacking a badger mole, only the fly was packing some serious firepower. She would later consider it ironic she thought of the word firepower just as Aang bent a fireball and threw it at the creature's eye. Thank the spirits for that. If that was normal, she might have regretted slugging him in Ba Sing Se. What? What happened? Toph demanded. All I felt was Twinkletoes taking off. What's going on? She kept turning to her head to look at the others. The shaking caused by the creature's feet was giving her very good clarity of what was around her. He just took off into the air, Suki told her, her eyes not looking away from the fight above them. Even if she could, she wouldn't. The last time she had technically seen Aang go into the avatar state, she had been too far away to actually see anything. Now she had a front row seat to it. He's fighting that thing. And why are we just standing here like a bunch of idiots? The bounty hunter amongst them demanded. Come on! She urged Nyla on, cracking her whip. The Shirsha seemed to hiss in agreement and sped towards the giant creature. You ready, Akela? Sokka asked the wolf beside him. Akela's answer was to lift his head back and howl a challenge at the creature. I thought you were. Both tribesman and wolf followed June into battle. Suki went after them, and soon caught up with them. The rest of them heard someone landing behind them. Given the amount that was going on, they were surprised to have heard that in the first place. Looking back, they saw a member of the Konoha ANBU standing before them and instantly recognizing that he was one of the shinobi following them. Please tell your team to get the Hokage and the rest of the shinobi in Konoha out here and into the fight, Katara said. He nodded his acknowledgement. We're setting up multiple entry points right now, but it might take a few minutes for a coherent force to come through and aid you, he told them. Once those words were said, he leapt back to where he had come from. I hope we can last a few minutes, she said, mostly to herself. Then we'd better start, Azula declared, walking over to Fanning. Have you gotten your bearings back? She asked the dragon. He got back on his feet and flapped his wings once to answer her question. Good to know. She climbed aboard him. I'll try to helping from the air, she told the others. Fanning launched himself into the air. I thought you didn't want a dragon, you had Naruto. Zuko shouted up at her. Well, he's not here right now, is he? She shouted back down. The dragon then flew straight into the fight, breathing fire onto the creature. Well, let's get going already, guys. Toph told Zuko and Katara before running off to fight the creature. Both the firebender and the waterbender shared a quick look with each other before following her. Location unknown. I can't believe it. I was actually eaten by the Geto Mazo. The blonde exclaimed. That's about the gist of it, Yudakata told him. So, we are literally inside the thing, correct? He asked the Mizukage among them. He wanted to be sure he wasn't stuck inside a very weird prison or something like that. Yes, we are, Yugura answered. And how long have you guys been in here? He couldn't help but ask the question. It was just one of those things you had to ask someone. That's a little personal, isn't it? The pink-eyed shinobi asked, a little offended. Bunpuka couldn't help but chuckle. When you first met me, one of the first questions that came out of your mouth was how I kept my beard clean when I had nothing to use. Yugura couldn't help the small blush on his face at those words. Alright, fine, you've got me there. As he turned to look at the male blonde among them, his blush began to fade away. But to answer your question, Naruto, we're not entirely sure. What do you mean? Naruto asked back. Let me put it to you this way, Naruto, B said. How long has it been since I was taken? A few weeks, he answered softly. What happened that day was still painful to him, even if he didn't show it on his face anymore. It only felt like 3 days or so for me. And as I am one of the ones who have been here the longest, I can honestly say that I have lost track, Han told him, agreeing with what B said. It was a little unnerving at first, but I got used to it. The Fire Paragon could only stare at the IWA shinobi with a look of semi-horror. Oh, hell no, that's not happening to me, he declared. I need to get out of here. You'll have to forgive us if we don't point out the exit to you, Yujito said, obviously sarcastic. We all kinda gave up at some point. But I still have to try. He turned around and started to run, desperate to find a way out of this place. But all he could see was the white void all around him. He must have run for a good 10 minutes before finally stopping. But when he turned around to see if the others were still in sight, he found that he was still in the same spot. Oh no, he groaned. Please, by all means, keep running, Fu said to him with a grin. Right now, you're the only person here who has the type of muscles I like, and I was enjoying the show. Excuse me, but we're right here, Yugura told her, gesturing to the rest of the males there. Rashi turned to look at him with a slightly bemused expression. Would that be the royal we were using there, Yugura? He asked with a small smile. I know you used to be a Mizukage, but I had no idea you were royalty on top of that too. He stifled a snarl of frustration and annoyance. You know what I mean, Rashi, he replied. There are 6 other guys here. One of those guys is freakishly tall and keeps his head covered. 2 are way too old for me, not counting Mr. Freakishly Tall, and the other guy is too bulky for my tastes. Fu answered, counting them off on her fingers. That's 5. She just smiled at the Mizukage. The only kind of woman who would date you is the kind who has a fetish for small boys, she said brightly. As if on cue, all the men there, even the old priest, gave her an odd look. I'm just saying. Why don't you just become a lesbian then? B asked her. She made a face at him. I like the opposite sex much better than I do my own, thank you very much. Besides, the only other woman here would slice me to ribbons, she added with a slightly scared expression. And you know it, kid, Yujito told her with a very cat-like grin. Meanwhile, we're still stuck here with no way out, Naruto said, getting everyone's attention again. Have you guys tried talking to your Biju and figuring out a solution? All of the faces before him fell and turned into solemn expressions. Naruto, have you tried reaching out to your Biju? The priest among them asked, his voice quiet and yet was heard by everyone. He didn't say anything as he tried to call out the fox. Hey Kyubi, get out here, we need to talk, he mentally shouted, only to receive no reply. This isn't the time for jokes or naps, furball. We need to talk. Again, there was no reply. Fox, I am willing to admit that everything that comes out of your mouth is nothing less than pure gold, and you always give the best advice, if you show yourself. If buttering up and flattering the Biju didn't work, then he didn't know what would. But for a third time, he didn't get a reply. It was like his mind was devoid of the Kyubi, and if he was being honest with himself, it made him nervous. Any luck with that? Fu asked. Her voice had an odd hopeful tone, like she was all praying that he would be able to contact the Biju he supposedly had. He looked at all of them. He's not there, he whispered in a strangled voice. It only lasted a second before he exploded. Why isn't he there? Where's Kyubi? Where did he go? They said nothing at first. Then Yagura spoke. Naruto, do you remember that I had said that I was the Jinchuriki of the Sanbai? Do you remember everyone else who introduced themselves saying a similar thing? He froze, going through his memories and realizing that they had said something like that. You mean all of us? He tried to ask, only to fail at finding the right words. Everyone else nodded. The Akatsuki sealed our Biju into the statue, and we were brought along for the ride, Yujito said. They're gone, we don't have them anymore. When he heard that, he couldn't believe it. The fox is really gone. Utakata nodded once. Yep, he's gone, probably sucked out of you by the statue. It was almost complete when you showed yourself. It just needed one more thing and you had that thing, so it reacted and ate you. Look, I know that the Akatsuki were trying to revive the Jubi, he told them all. But why would they be sealing the Biju into the Geto Mazo if that's what they were trying to do? Naruto, the Geto Mazo is more than just a statue, B answered. It was the husk of Jubi's body. It was somehow summoned from the moon. If he was surprised before, now he is stunned. You're kidding me. They all shook their heads in the negative. Then he realized, with growing horror, what that meant. Are you saying that the Jubi's body has all 9 of the Biju, has regained its former strength, power, body, and movement? Utakata asked him a question. What do you think? In the space they had unconsciously created by standing in a circle, a window was formed. And through that window, all 9 of them saw the rampage the Jubi was currently on. Location: battlefield. The few minutes both teams had to hold out for had long since passed. Konoha shinobi kept pouring out of the forests and joining the fight against the creature. But both Team Paragon and Team Avatar, at least the conscious ones, as Aang was still in the Avatar state and was attacking the creature, knew that those reinforcements would probably stop coming in soon. If they wanted to keep a good chance of surviving, or even winning, this fight, it couldn't be drawn out. While the creature's main attention was on Aang, its tails seemed to act of their own accord against the others. They swept down across the ground, striking anyone who hadn't been fast enough to get out of their way. But the effect this could have had on the shinobi was greatly minimized by the benders on the ground, utilizing their respective elements to the fullest. Remind me again why I didn't bring the Yen archers or the dragon's fangs with us when we came back. Zuko shouted over to Toph as he beat back a tail with a large column of fire created by spinning the right blade of his Zanpakuto. The tail tried to fight against the fire for a couple of minutes before giving up the fight and moving away. Because you said, and I quote, "It's supposed to be a vacation away from all the stress and problems we've been having recently, and quite frankly, we need it," she answered as she bent the earth to jut out 2 columns to trap the tail that Zuko had beaten back, only to have it slithered free. "Well, the next time I say something like that, hit me so that we can make sure it's not stupidity talking. And make sure I bring one of them or both." "I thought that was supposed to be Azula's or Naruto's job?" she asked him. It certainly seemed like in the past. If one of them had said something potentially stupid, the other 2 would try and make sure it wasn't, which had led to an interesting evening on Ember Island that involved identical twin girls, a misunderstanding, and the number of waves that had washed up on the beach that day. "Were they there at the time?" he asked back, half sarcastic. He bent a fireball at the creature's body and was supported by a few shinobi who knew Katan Jutsu. But it didn't seem to work, as the fireballs just seemed to bounce off of its skin. Alright, I will. Would you like me to have the Daili and Kyoshi warriors come along as well?" "You'd have to take that up with Suki. Other than that, yes please," he answered before suddenly throwing the left blade of his Zanpakuto at an incoming tail. It turned into a lightning bolt as it flew through the air but missed as the tail suddenly curved around it. He gave an annoyed grunt as he grabbed hold of the sword again. "Hey, what happened to Katara?" The blind earthbender had lost track of her in the midst of the singular chaos that was the creature. Now that she was actually looking for her, Toph couldn't feel the waterbender. "She's up in the sky with Azula and Aang." Appa was able to get back up on his feet, so she took advantage of it. Looking up, Zuko saw the sky bison flying evasively through the sky, avoiding the creature's attacks. He would periodically fly low to a nearby river so his passenger would be able to bend some water out of it before flying back up. If the creature knew about what Appa was doing, it paid no attention. Instead, it kept its attention focused on Aang. Feeling a hand clap his shoulder, he looked over to see who it was. He relaxed somewhat when he saw that it was Shikamaru. "Well, this is troublesome," the Nara clan heir said as he stared up at the creature. "Now is not a good time for that, Mr. Lazy," Toph shouted at him as she bent a boulder out of the ground and threw at an incoming tail. The boulder shattered against it, but it was enough to make the tail recoil. "I can see that." "Well, can you get in there and stop it with whatever it is you do? You know, that shadow-grabbing thingy?" she asked, not looking back at him. "My clan is already doing that. So far, their efforts are not even slowing it down." He had a look of worry as he spoke. "Do you have any idea what it is?" Zuko asked him. He shook his head. "I don't have a single clue." The sound of a running dog somehow managed to fill their ears, and when they looked in the direction where it came, they saw Akamaru coming towards them. "Kiba, do you know what that thing is?" Shikamaru asked the hound's rider. He also shook his head in the negative. "All I know is that it smells bad," he answered. "And I'm not the only one. Shino's bugs are afraid to even come out, and when Hinata tried to look at it with the Byakugan, she screamed and covered her eyes. I'm not sure if she's gone blind or not." "Do not worry, my youthful friends," Lee shouted as he landed next to them. "Niji suffered the same pain earlier in this fight, but he has recovered. I am sure the youthful Hinata will do the same." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Lee." Out of the chaos, June came towards them, riding Nyla hard. "What in the name of the spirits is that thing?" she demanded as she stopped her Shurshu aside Akamaru. Behind her, several members of the Akimichi clan grew in height and tried to push the creature back. Even though its attention wasn't on them, they only succeeded in pushing it half an inch back. Its tails swapped in and knocked them all aside, sending them flying through the air. Most of them were able to shrink back down to normal size before hitting the ground. The ones who didn't made a bit of a mess where they landed. Both Shikamaru and Kiba winced at that. "That's going to hurt," Kiba stated. "You guys still haven't answered my question," June told them. "What in the name of the spirits is that thing?" she asked again, pointing her whip at for extra emphasis. "We do not know, my very youthful friend," Lee told her. "But we do not need to know its name to defeat it. We only need our youth." He pumped the air with his fist. If they tried to look closely, they would have sworn that there were fires burning bright in his eyes. "Lee, right now, I don't think any of us care about what you say. We care about what you do." She turned Nyla back to where the fight was. "Now come on. We need to beat that thing." She and the Shurshu charged off again, going straight for the creature. Both Toph and Lee were right behind her. Zuko, on the other hand, saw that Appa was flying towards the water. We need to get Katara on the wounded, he said, mostly to himself, before running off in the direction of the river. Before either of the two Konoha shinobi could say anything, one of the tails slammed into the earth near them, causing giant boulders to start raining down on them. Kiba and Akamaru leapt into action. Gutsuga! The heir to the Inuzuka clan cried as he and Akamaru twisted into mini gray tornadoes, smashing the boulders into smaller pieces. Other Inuzuka clan members and their partners were doing the same thing all around them. During all of this, Shikamaru tried to get out of the way of the shower. He kept his head down and kept moving. Once he was out of the way of the boulders, he saw Choji, Ino, Tenten, and Sokka with Akela standing around him. Nice hustle there, Shikamaru, Ino told him with a smirk. I think that's the fastest I've ever seen you run. You are a very troublesome woman, Ino, he said in reply. Do you have any idea how to fight that thing? Tenten asked him, panting slightly. She had just been on the front line, trying to beat the creature back. No, I don't. Even an inkling of a plan that I have is squashed by it, and what it does, he answered with a shake of his head. The fact that Aang seems to be dueling it doesn't really help. They all looked up at the sky. Even with Azula and Fan Ning helping him, Katara and Appa had disappeared from the sky, which meant Zuko had made contact with her. Aang's attention was fully on the creature, and vice versa. It did almost look like a duel, if the look of hard harshness on the Avatar's face whenever they could see it was anything to go by. Do we know what happened? Choji asked Sokka. No. One moment, he was checking over Appa. The next, he and that creature made eye contact, and he snarled at it, the tribesman answered. It was almost disturbing to see, actually. The only time he had actually seen Aang lose his temper was when they encountered the sandbenders after Appa was taken. But that had been a full-on explosion of anger. What happened here was pure rage, contempt, and hate when those two saw each other. That was something he never wanted to see on Aang's face again. A loud explosion filled the air, making them all look up. It seemed like Aang had torn a chunk of the earth and set it ablaze with his bending before sending it hurling straight towards the creature. It caught the flaming chunk of rock, but then it exploded in its hand, making it roar in pain. When they all heard that roar, everyone clasped their ears in pain. Even Fan Ning started to falter. The only person who didn't hold his ears and prayed that the roar would stop was Aang. Instead, he bent the nearby river up out of its bed and slammed into the creature's mouth, essentially giving it a mouthwash. It stumbled backwards a few feet before finally stopping. Seeing this, Aang tried to up the pressure of the water, but the creature reached out and struck his sphere of air, making him lose control of the water. The creature tried to catch him and crush him, reaching out with its claw. But before it could, an angry lowing filled the air. Appa swooped down from above the two and knocked the claw with a flap of his tail, bending the air into a furious column of twisting air. The creature then turned its eye upon the sky bison and tried to attack it, but Aang intervened with a roar of his own and several fireballs, beating the creature back away from Appa, who quickly flew away. Fan Ning and Azula rejoined the fight, the dragon with his fire and the firebender with her lightning. And all the while, the creature's tails tried to either assist it in its fight against Aang or tried to kill the shinobi attacking it. If we manage to live through this, I hope to Kami that we never find something this troublesome again, Shikamaru muttered to himself as they all rejoined the fight. He was unaware of the fact that everyone there had unconsciously prayed for the same thing. Location unknown. Naruto wanted to look away from the window, but his eyes remained glued to what was appearing. They all were. They just watched in silence as they saw the Jubi attack Aang and the Konoha shinobi. Finally, he tore his gaze away from the mirror and looked at the rest of them. We have to do something, he declared. They all looked up at him after that declaration. So you have something in mind? Utakata asked him in a very dry tone. No, not really. It was a little embarrassing, especially after what he had just said, but it was the truth. We still have to do something. And what would that be, kid? Rashi asked, half curious and half amused. I don't know. But we just can't stand here and do nothing, the blonde protested. It was just wrong in every sense he had entrusted agreed with what he said. Why not? Asked Han. We're quite familiar with doing nothing. Yeah, it's become quite a good friend of ours ever since we got stuck in this place, Fu agreed with a shrug. Naruto could only stare at them. Are you telling me that you would rather do nothing and let that continue? He pointed down at the window, just as Azula threw lightning at the jubi. You wouldn't try to stop it? What can we do? Bunpuku asked him in a quiet, gentle voice. We are stuck inside of the jubi itself. And in case you haven't noticed already, we don't have a way out of here, Yujito added, her tone pure sarcasm. Besides, what's the point of trying to save them? Fu asked as she stared at the mirror with a frown. Naruto swung his head over to look at her. You want to say that again? He asked her, his tone challenging. She looked up at him, the frown still on her face. Why should we try to save them when they've done nothing for us? She asked him, meeting his silent challenge. He gestured angrily down at the window, right at the image of the dragon. The woman who's riding that dragon is the woman I love, he said in a tight voice. She, as well as many of my friends and comrades, are out there fighting it. She looked down at the mirror and then back at him. That's not good enough. What? As he spoke, his voice became a growl. What do you mean that's not good enough? Of course it's good enough. Not to me, it isn't. I see no reason to try and stop the jubi from its rampage. My friends are out there, he shouted, jabbing his finger down at the mirror. That's their fault, she replied with ease. It's quite stupid of them, really. They should have just run. They'd have lived if they did. Now they're just going to die. Naruto let out a roar of anger and leapt for her, spinning into a kick. She wasn't expecting that move and got his foot buried in her stomach. She flew backwards from the circle, and he followed. When the two of them landed on the ground, they immediately started to fight each other. There was no real sense of actual fighting styles as they exchanged blows. They just turned into brawlers. Sometimes they would separate from one another for a couple of seconds before going at it again. The only thing that remained constant was the angry looks both of them had on their faces. But when they separated themselves again and charged forward to punch each other, a block of sand appeared in front of their fists, stopping both of their punches. Surprised by the interrupting action, they didn't see the two small tendrils of sand sneaking up behind them and grabbing them by the foot. Finding themselves hoisted up into the air, they found themselves looking at Bunpuku from the upside-down perspective. Are the two of you finished? He asked them in a mildly disapproving voice. Their answer was to glare at one another. He frowned and the sand started to shake them, making them wiggle in the air. Must I repeat myself? He asked as the sand stopped. Naruto shook his head rapidly, not wanting to get shaken like that again. No, we'll stop. The priest smiled. Thank you. The sand let go of their feet and they fell to the ground, barely managing to land on their feet like a pair of cats. Still feeling the pains from where Fu had managed to strike him, the blonde looked over at Bunpuku. How did you do that? The old man chuckled. I was the Jinchuriki of Shikaku at one point, remember? But there's no sand in here and you don't have a gourd or anything that can even remotely hold sand, he pointed out. Once those words had been spoken, the sand disappeared. The reality around you can be bent to your will, Yagura explained. Really? Asked Naruto, getting a nod from the Mizukage. The fire paragon looked down at his hand and started to imagine a kunai was there. He shaped the weapon in his mind, remembering the color of it, the sharpness of it, how the light dully reflected off of it, the weight of it, and the feel of it in his hand. And all of a sudden, there it was in his hand. Cool, he stated. I know, right? He asked with a grin. He returned the grin before looking around. Wait, if reality can be bent to our will, why haven't one of you tried creating a room or something? We have, Han answered. But it all returns to this when someone new arrives, like you. It, for lack of a better phrase, goes back to basic. I see. His curious expression turned serious. We're getting off topic here. We need to stop the jubi. And why should we? Fu demanded, her frown turning into a scowl. They all called us freaks and monsters. They told their kids to keep away from us. They beat and molested us when we were young, and when we would finally become powerful, they would glare at us, make scathing comments about us behind our backs, and keep us confined to a house on the outskirts of the village unless they needed us. Heck, some of those bastards who were abusing us actually collaborated with the Akatsuki to kick us out of the village and offer us to them on a silver platter. They all stared at her in silence. Finally, Yagura looked at Rashi. He knew that it was probably not the best time, but he felt that it had to be said. And you thought I was royalty? The IWA shinobi scowled at him. Not the time, Yagura. Fu, I know how you must feel about your village, Bunpuku told her with a gentle voice. I was imprisoned and despised by the people of Sunagakure. But I held no hatred for them or any ill will. You have to find it in your heart to do the same. What if I don't want to? She asked him, as tears began to form in her eyes while those same eyes narrowed in a glare. I endured so much pain from the stares, glares, and even hateful comments. I grew angry that I was being picked on and attacked just because of something that was outside my control. I gradually hated them back for what they've done to me. So why should I let go of my hatred? If the Jubi would destroy the entire world for the crimes of those bastards, I would be glad to sit back and watch it burn. Then why did you still wear the headband of Takigakure? Yujuto asked her. Don't you have anyone you would protect in the village? Someone who would have made you stay? The priest continued, ignoring the former Jinchuriki of the Nibi. She fell silent, thinking about it. My twin, Shibuki, she finally answered. He tried his best to protect me when we were little. When he became the leader of the village, I promised that I would always be there to help him, even though his council disapproved of that. And how do you think he's feeling since you were taken? Naruto asked her, latching onto the idea. Would you be willing to let the Jubi come to your village and destroy it, killing him in the process? Not really, she declared softly with a look of regret at the mere thought of it. That's what I feel right when I look at that. He pointed down at the mirror. Aang and Azula were attacking the Jubi while the Tails were attacking the surrounding shinobi, trying to smash or crush them. I want to stop the Jubi to protect them. I don't know about all of you, but I do know that there are people who miss you. He looked over at the two Kumo shinobi. Yujuto, when I was in Kumo and heard your name, it was spoken with respect and awe. A lot of people said that it was a tragedy that you were taken. B. When your brother found out what happened, he tried to kill me. When he calmed down, he ordered us to leave and never come back. He turned his gaze to the shinobi from IWA. Han, Rashi, Anoki still grieves for you. He sent shinobi out to find you two when he heard that you were being attacked. He did? Han asked. He couldn't believe it. He never would have thought his sensei would risk resources like that, just to make sure they were okay. At least he cared for us, even when we were being abducted. Naruto nodded before turning to look at the priest among them. Bunpuku, you say that you hold no hatred for Suna. Would you willingly let the Jubi have the chance to destroy it? I would not, he stated firmly. Yagura, history might remember you as a bloody tyrant, but would you allow the Jubi to tear Kiri apart? The fire paragon asked the former Jinchuriki of the Sanbai. Yagura scowled at his question. I swore an oath to protect, defend, and lead that village with all of my being. I will not let it be destroyed. He looked at Utakata, who spoke before he did. And of me? Asked the former Jinchuriki of the Rokubi. I left Kiri before I was captured. I hold no real loyalty to it. But would you let it be destroyed? The blonde pressed him. You would truly let the village, as well as the rest of the world, burn, be torn asunder, just because you didn't feel like trying to stop it all? He was silent as the words went through his mind and stayed there for a little while. I'm not that selfish, he declared after a few moments of silence. Not after meeting someone that I was friends with for a short time. She must still be grieving for me. But why would it matter in the end? Rashi asked Naruto, getting everyone's attention. Do you think that this is the first time someone's tried to collect the Biju to gain ultimate power? I'll grant you that this might be the first chance that they've succeeded. But even if we do stop the Jubi and if we get out, there'll be someone else down the road who will want to do something similar to us. They all had to admit, it was a good point. So long as they were around and so long as they held the Biju, odds are that there was someone who would want to obtain them to wield ultimate power. Maybe it would be 5 years from now, maybe 15, maybe 50. Or maybe when they were all dead and new Jinchuriki had been created. The fact remained the same, there would be someone else who would want the power of the Biju. As a silence fell over them, Naruto looked down at the window. Then remembering what had been said before, he looked around the white void and then at his hand. Bunpuku, you said that the reality around us can be bent to our will, right? And we are currently inside the Jubi? Yes, on both accounts, the priest answered. Okay then, he said with a smile that if any of his enemies had seen, they would have known to run. I have an idea. Location, battlefield. In the designated area for healing the wounded, Katara, Sakura, and other medical shinobi were doing their best to stay on top of things. The number of people coming into the area was becoming more and more steady, something that made them all nervous. But they didn't stop, they just kept going. "More incoming!" shouted a nearby shinobi, alerting them. They all turned to see who it was. It turned out to be Shikamaru supporting Kiba, with Hinata and Sokka following them. Both Akela and Akamaru were at the end of the line. Katara immediately ran over to her brother's side. "Sokka, what happened?" she asked him, looking him over. "One of the tails managed to send a rock the size of one of Akela's paws at me and clipped my side," he answered in a slightly strained voice. He winced and let out a strangled hiss when she found the area. "Ah. Yeah, that's the spot. Come on back." She led him to one of the available spaces and sat him down. She reached for the pouch at her side and bent the water out of it. "What about you guys?" Sakura asked the others. "I'm almost out of chakra," Hinata answered, swaying on her feet. Sakura signaled one of the other medics, who gently led the Hyuga clan heiress away so she could receive the right treatment. "Kiba's leg is broken and I have a concussion," Shikamaru told her. "I can speak for myself, Shikamaru," Kiba told him with a pained voice. He was taken by Sakura to a space next to Sokka and sat him down. Shikamaru all but collapsed next to her. No one told him to move, as he wasn't really blocking the path and everyone was too busy to complain. Sakura went to work right away. Covering her hands in green chakra, she placed them gently against Inuzuka's broken leg and began to heal it. She took her time, as she and Kiba knew that the injury put him out of action for the rest of the fight. But she also didn't waste time. She was careful and made sure that his leg would be successfully mended. She kept her focus on the leg, ignoring the sounds of nearby shinobi groaning in pain, or even the few who were dying, and the sounds of battle coming from nearby. "There you go," she declared as she finished. "It's mended, but you'll have to stay out of the fight from now on, Kiba." "Yeah, I kinda figured," he replied as he gently tested his newly mended leg. Akamaru whined in relief at the sight. "Now, Shikamaru, hold still," she ordered the Nara clan heir. He didn't grumble or complain as she brought her hands up and around his head. "Just what in the name of Kami are we fighting?" she asked them. "You know, I've been hearing that question a lot recently," Sokka mused aloud. "Personally, I'm going with big, ugly, scary thingy and leaving it at that." He winced as his sister continued to work on his side. "Sokka, it has to be something," she said in small protest. "What would you call it then?" "I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of spirit." He rolled his eyes. "Ah, yes, of course. How silly of me not to realize that anything that looks weird or unnatural must be some sort of spirit," he said with full-blown sarcasm. It soon disappeared as his face scrunched up in pain. "Oh. You did that on purpose." They both knew that Katara was a master healer. She wouldn't have made him feel any more pain than need be. She just looked at him with an expression that was half amused and half innocent. "Did I?" Akela, lying on his stomach next to Sokka, rolled his eyes in exasperation. "Now's not the time to be fooling around, Katara," Sakura admonished her. "Right, sorry." She refocused on the healing. "But in all seriousness, what is that thing?" the Hokage's student asked after a moment. "I already said I don't know," Shikamaru answered. He was still trying to figure it out, but he just didn't know enough. "Like I said, I've been hearing that a lot recently," Sokka asked him before gasping shortly in pain. "Ah. Oh. Katara. Will you keep your voice down?" she told him crossly. "And that was your rib mending, not me." "Oh. Sorry." Overhead and off in the distance, they heard the Jubi roar. While they weren't close enough to get the full effect, the sound of the roar echoed and reached them, making them wince and try to desperately ignore it. As the roar faded away, more wounded shinobi came in. Among them were Lee and Niji. "We have got to find a way to defeat that thing," Kiba said as they watched the newcomers lead to free spacing to be checked over and receive treatment. "And how exactly do you suppose we do that?" Shikamaru asked him. "The troublesome thing isn't even paying attention to us." "I know that. It keeps its attention on Aang. But we still need to beat it somehow." "Kiba, everyone is having a hard time staying close to it, let alone trying to defeat it," Sokka told the Inuzuka clan heir. Those tales are keeping us at bay and Aang isn't helping either. In his sole concentration of the creature, Aang didn't seem to realize that he would have been killing other people. Thankfully, Zuko and Sokka had realized this and began running interference, Zuko in the sky riding Appa and Sokka on the ground, which was why he got clipped by a rock. Aang is still in the Avatar state? Katara asked her brother. He nodded. This is the longest I've ever seen him stay like that. Those two are completely focused on trying to kill one another. Nothing can stop them from attacking one another. But why would that be? We've never seen that creature before. Katara, you and I both heard that voice come from Aang. I think it would be a safe bet to say that one of his past lives knew what that creature was. And going by how hard Aang is fighting, I'd say that they don't like each other. I guess that's something we'll have to find out once this battle is over, Kiba said. Everyone, look at the monster! Shouted someone, making everyone turn their head at the creature as directed. When they did, they all saw something incredibly weird. The creature was standing completely still, its mouth agape. Oddly enough, Aang didn't press his advantage. He just hung in the sky in his sphere of air. Both Appa and Fa Ning did nothing as well, staying afloat in the air next to the sphere. For a single moment, the entire world felt frozen. Then that moment was gone. The creature gave Aang one last look, full of hatred and rage. It gave one last cry, that oddly sounded like it was grieving and also pleading. And then, it just disappeared. One moment it was there and the next, it wasn't. It just vanished. Everyone just stared at the space where the creature had stood. No one said a word. There were no shouts or cries of victory. There was just silence. Later, whether they had known about the others or not, everyone had agreed that the end to the fight could only be described with one word: anticlimactic. In the 2 weeks since the fight against the creature, things went relatively back to normal for Konoha. People went about their business and left it at that. Those who had been badly injured during the fight were immediately rushed back to the hospital. While many lives were saved, some were still lost. The shinobi who could be put into action were going out on missions like nothing had ever happened. But for Team Paragon and Team Avatar, those 2 weeks were spent looking for their missing teammate. Whenever they could, they would head out and hunt for him. But they just couldn't find Naruto. Even Nyla couldn't find him, as June told them that the blonde's scent kept disappearing and reappearing. But they didn't give up on him. They kept on searching for him, and the person who was at the forefront of each search was Azula. Are we all set? Sokka asked as he looked around at everyone there. They stood in front of the gates to Konoha and were about to go looking for the blonde again. Yeah, we are, Zuko answered from atop of Fa Ning. He was the only one there because he had forbidden Azula from riding with him after she had kicked him off of the dragon, even though she had apologized and said that she was a little on edge, which a more ungrateful person might reply with understatement. Same here, Aang said from atop of Appa with Momo on his shoulders. Once the fight with the creature was over, he had descended from the sky to the ground, going out of the Avatar state. When everyone asked him what had happened, he surprised them by claiming he hadn't a clue of what happened. The last thing he remembered was making eye contact with the creature. After that, nothing. Both Ino and her father offered to go into his mind to find what the relationship between him and the creature was, but everyone vetoed the idea, saying that there was a very good chance of them getting stuck in there. Then let's get going already, Toph said with impatience, itching to start looking again. Since they continually failed in finding Naruto, some people were beginning to believe that he was dead. Both of the teams kept denying that, insisting that he was alive. It didn't help that there was an incident when they started a brawl in a bar after someone who disliked Naruto said that he was happy the fox brat had died loudly. It nearly took the Hokage and the Anbu to put down the riot, but in the midst of the fight, another villager with a grudge against Naruto went even as far as to try and kill Sokka and Aang with a dagger, cursing them for being friends with him. Nyla perked up and started sniffing the air, catching his rider by surprise. Whoa, what is it, Nyla? June asked him as she resettled herself in the saddle. Do you have his scent? Everyone looked over at the Shirshu with naked hope in their eyes. Maybe this would be their break. Maybe the scent would hold, and they would be able to find Naruto. But when the Shirshu lowered his head and began to hiss, June was confused. What's up with you? The only time you hiss like that is when Naruto's around, and just insulted she trailed off as she looked in the direction Nyla was hissing at, her jaw dropping. When everyone looked in the same direction, their jaws also dropped, even the animals. What they all felt at the scene in front of them was summed perfectly by Sokka. You have got to be kidding me. But nobody was kidding, what they saw was the truth. Walking towards them, like nothing had really happened in the past 2 weeks, was Naruto himself. They just stared in shocked silence as he came up to them, stopping a few paces in front of Katara. Hey guys? He offered somewhat weakly. No one said a word to him, they just stared at him. The air around was becoming saturated with a feeling of awkwardness. It finally broke when Azula walked up to him and slugged him hard across the face, sending him to the ground with an audible thump. I deserve that, he admitted from where he lay on the ground. 3 weeks. She bellowed from the top of her voice, standing over him like a vengeful goddess. You left US and disappeared for 3 weeks. You left me and disappeared for 3 weeks. If you ever do something like that again to me, you are a dead man. I will hunt you down and make you wish that you had never been born, let alone left. Understand? Once the tirade was over, he couldn't help but laugh as he stood up. Cammy, I love you, woman, he declared with a big goofy grin. The two of them moved as one, reaching for each other and locking lips in a kiss that was hot enough to set them on fire. The reaction among the teams varied. Aang, Katara, and surpassingly, Momo, blushed at the sight. Sokka and Suki shared a smile. Zuko, Akela, and June rolled their eyes and waited for them to stop. When they finally separated from one another, June asked, Are you guys done? Maybe, Naruto answered. The grin was still somewhat there. We might find some privacy next time. Or we might not. Where'd you get the sword? Sokka asked him, looking at the katana strapped to his side. The same place you and Zuko got yours. It would have been a cryptic answer if anyone else had heard it, but everyone there knew what he meant and left it at that. Where did you go for 3 weeks, Naruto? Aang finally asked. I went to take care of the last known Akatsuki member, and to make sure some people I knew got home safely, the blonde answered. This time, it was a cryptic answer that nobody understood, except for himself. Location Kumo. I was in his own personal training ground, pounding target dummies into the ground. He had been doing this for the past few weeks, ever since he had learned that B had been taken. As that thought crossed his mind, tears started to well up in his eyes. That night, he had destroyed an entire forest in sadness and rage. He wanted to take it out on the Konoha shinobi, specifically, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, but he knew it would bring either B or Yujito back. He could still remember the days when he had met both of them. Yujito had been brought home by his father, and he had instantly adopted her as a sister. When he met B, he had been trying to find his tag team partner, and found it in the odd kid who liked to rap, even if it was bad. He called the two of them brothers, and he stayed by those words. His nostalgia and sadness turned into anger, and he focused that into beating the dummies apart. When he was on the last one, he crushed it completely with a lariat fueled with anger and grief. It flew through the air and went through 4 trees before stopping. As he stood there, panting from exhaustion, he heard a low whistle. Damn, bro. That was quite the show, a familiar voice said, making him freeze. He then turned around and saw both Yujito and B standing before him. Miss us much? His adopted sister asked him with a smirk. Location, IWA. Inoki made his way to the entrance of his village. He had been pulled out of a meeting because of a message that required him to come down to the entrance, saying it was urgent. All right, I'm here, he said snappishly to the entrance guard. What's the problem? The guard simply pointed at the other side of the entrance. He followed the finger and went still when he saw what it was the shinobi was pointing at. Hey, you old grump, Rashi said with a grin and a wave. Inoki-sensei, Han said in greeting, being a little more formal. Location, Kiri. Mei sat at her desk, going through paperwork. The stuff seemed to be never-ending. Please give me a distraction right now, she silently begged. That was when the door to her office was knocked on. Yes? She called out, secretly glad for it. Lady Mizukage, there's a guy out here who wants to see you, Remus spoke from beyond the door. He said he used to be a shinobi. Send him in. The door opened and a handsome young man in a blue kimono walked. She didn't know why, but he looked oddly familiar. Are you the Mizukage? He asked her. I am her. My name is Utakata. I'm the Jinchuriki of the Rokubi and former shinobi of this village. I was hoping you'd let me come back. Location: Taki. Shibuki was waiting in a clearing just outside of the village. A messenger hawk had flown in earlier, telling him to come to this clearing at this time, alone. Normally, he would have never paid attention to something like that, but it had been written in a coded message that only 2 people knew, and he was one of them. Thinking about that letter made him think about his twin sister, making his heart beat with sadness. When they were little, despite what had happened to her and despite what he could do to protect her, she had been one that protected him. After what happened with his former sensei invading, he made a vow to never be weak or afraid anymore. But that vow didn't do any good when he learned that Fu had been taken. So he promised to never let that happen again. As he kept his back to a tree and kept checking and rechecking the surrounding area, he heard a chuckle he hadn't heard in a long time. Nice to see you've finally grown up and manned up, Shibuki. Where's the guy who used to be terrified of a leaf floating by? He looked at where the voice originated from. Is that you, Fu? He asked with naked hope in his voice. As if to answer his question, she stepped out of the shadows of the trees and into the light of the clearing. Hey, little brother, been a while, she casually greeted him. When he heard those words, he frowned and lapsed into an old argument. For the last time, Fu, you're my twin sister, not my older sister. Hey, I came out of Mom 5 minutes before you did. That makes me older. They stood in the clearing, arguing a pointless argument. And yet they did it with smiles on their faces. They were happy to see one another. Location: Konoha. Both Sakura and Sasuke walked out of the hospital. Sasuke had still been in there during the fight with the creature, and he was finally getting out. I am glad to get out of that bed, he told her as they walked. I think I was about to go stir crazy in there. Well, you didn't miss much, I can assure you, she said in reply. He frowned slightly. That's a lie, and the both of us know. She laughed lightly, and he found that he couldn't keep his frown on his face. Instead, it was replaced with a smile. But when he looked to see beyond the walls of the hospital, the smile died away and was replaced with a small look of horror. Seeing the look, Sakura turned to see what had caused that. Oh no, not them, she said with an annoyed expression when she saw what it was. Just beyond the walls of the hospital were Sasuke's fangirls. Sasuke! They all cheered when they saw him. He didn't do anything in response, at least none that they saw. He had figured out that when it came to fangirls, it boiled down to 3 basic things. The first was don't make any sudden movements, the second was to avoid making eye contact, and the third was if the first 2 failed, run like hell and find a good hiding spot, which were becoming rapidly diminished for him. However, Sakura did something that surprised him and the fangirls. She turned and pulled Sasuke into a kiss which, after being momentarily surprised, responded gladly to. The fangirls just watched in stunned silence as the make-out session continued. When it finally stopped, Sakura gave them a challenging stare. Mine! She declared. A groan swept through the horde, as well as a few sobs. Not wanting to risk angering her as her reputation about that was well known, they all left. When they were finally gone, Sasuke looked at her. You are an amazing woman, he stated. She smiled. Flatterer. Now come on, the others have probably already started the party. Night had fallen as Tsunade walked down the streets of the village. After Naruto gave his, rather brief, report of what he had been doing the past 3 weeks, word somehow spread that the Akatsuki had been destroyed. People felt that was cause for celebration and an impromptu festival was thrown together. Everyone was having a good time. But she wasn't, not yet. Multiple things were going through her mind. Just because the known members of the Akatsuki were dead, didn't mean the organization itself was done for. They still had no idea how many people were a part of it, or even who those people were. They had no idea where they were hiding or what they would do now that the Akatsuki was in shambles, at least, she hoped it would be in shambles. How they received funding outside of missions or resources was still a complete mystery. And there was also the matter of Kabuto. They hadn't heard even a whisper of him since he broke out. This was worrying because the man was surely up to something, they just didn't know what it was or where he even was. Not to mention that they had no idea what that creature was, the suggestion of it being a Biju had been bounced around, but people really didn't believe it. It was common knowledge that there were only 9 Biju. She mentally ordered herself to put all that in the back of her head. There'll be plenty of time to worry about it later, she told herself. For now, you have a night to relax. She stopped at Naruto and Azula's house. She had decided to invite both Team Paragon and Team Avatar to join her and the Konoha 11 for a small party before they left, and the last thing she heard about them was they were all there. She walked up the steps and went for the door. But when she reached for the handle and touched it, the door swung slightly inward. Cautious and concerned, she pushed the door open, seeing the house was shrouded in darkness. "Hello?" she called out, reaching for the light switch and flicking it on. Her heart fell at what she saw. She had been in the house once or twice, usually with Jiraiya when they had to talk to Naruto and Azula, and she had seen what they had done, consciously or unconsciously, to add their own style to the place. But now, it was empty, completely bare. It looked like it was waiting for someone to come and live there. As she walked into the house, she saw a small piece of paper lying on the kitchen counter. It was written in Naruto's handwriting. It simply read. Naruto sat in a small room, trying to be careful not to wrinkle what he wore. If he did, somehow his ass would be lit in fire. "Nervous much, Gaki?" asked Kyubi. "Of course I'm nervous," he replied. His life was about to change. "Yeah, well, I've never understood these kinds of things," the fox admitted with a blasé shrug. "It seems kind of redundant, not to mention pointless." "Well, you're not human. You're an only Kami-No's howl demon fox with too many tails and a sarcastic attitude that I really don't need right now," the blonde snapped at him. "So glad you noticed," the Biju replied, using the aforementioned sarcastic attitude. "Now you would just relax already?" "I can't. I'm freaking out here." How the hell did Zuko manage to stay calm when this happened to him? He all but shot out of the chair and started pacing. Kyubi rolled his eyes. "I'm sure he had the same panic attack you're having right now. He was just able to fake his calmness very well. Now will you relax? Or am I going to have hit you with a bombardment of images that will make you relax?" "You don't need to do that." Naruto knew those images the Biju was talking about, having been subject to them when he had been in boot and got frustrated by either the training officers or when the fox was teaching him. Quite frankly, he did not need them right now. It might just make things worse. He finally stopped pacing and stood in front of the mirror. It had been more than 2 years since Team Paragon had gone to the elemental countries. He had changed in subtle ways. He had grown a few inches. His visage had hardened, making him look more man than boy or teenager. His hair had grown longer and shaggier, falling back and down to the back of his neck. He would have cut it and made it shorter, but Azula had said she liked it like that, so he didn't do anything. He had been recently toying with the idea of growing a beard. Not a full-on beard, but something like a goatee. The clothes he wore were formal robes in the colors of black and deep scarlet. His medallion hung outside the robes for all to see. The door to the room opened, the sound making him turn his head. "Oh, it's just you guys," he said with some small relief as Sokka and Zuko walked in. "And what exactly does that mean?" Sokka asked him with a raised eyebrow. The tribesman had also changed in those 2 years. He was also taller, and what muscles he decided to show had taken on a bit of a muscular tone. He had kept his hair in the style of his tribe, but had shaved the sides of his head. His medallion was out for everyone to see as well, over robes of light and dark blue. "Are you nervous?" "Of course not. I'm terrified," he replied, swinging his body around. The water paragon rolled his eyes. "For the love of the spirits, you knew this was going to happen. You made the decision." "I can still freak out, Sokka. I'm getting married." He gestured wildly to emphasize his point. "I still don't see why that's cause for you to start panicking." "You will, Sokka, you will," Zuko promised with a small smile. The Fire Lord had grown as well, putting some muscle and a little bit of weight on his body. Even though he wore the headpiece in his hair, said hair still fell around his face, framing his eyes. He wore the robes of the Fire Lord, looking comfortable and confident in them. "And if it helps, Naruto, I can assure you that Azula is just as nervous as you are." The blonde snorted. "The difference there, Zuko, is that she's able to calm herself down by setting things on fire. I don't have that option." "Going by that definition, you are going to have a very interesting 9 months when you finally get my sister pregnant," the scarred dragon remarked. "I remember a bit when my mother was pregnant with her, and she told me stories of when she was pregnant with me." When he heard that, Naruto's face blanched. However, Sokka came to his rescue. This is coming from the guy who married Mississippi Hidden Knives and Projectiles? If anyone is going to have an interesting 9 months when their wife is pregnant, it's going to be you when Mai is carrying that child. They all had the same image of a pregnant Mai fiddling with a throwing knife, an annoyed expression on her face that was on the verge of becoming pissed off. That image chilled them to the bone. Zuko went a step further and shuddered. Thanks for that, Sokka, he said. I really appreciate it. Sokka just grinned. Not a problem, Zuko. The banter helped Naruto relax a little. Has June showed up? He asked. When they had returned from the elemental countries, June had immediately left, telling them that she'll see them around before riding off on Nyla. While that was true, some of them did want to see her a bit more often. Sokka shook his head. Not since the last time I checked. But who knows? Maybe she'll show up just as the feast starts. She was never one to miss out on free food. Whenever the bounty hunter had eaten with them, never once had she paid. She was usually the first one out the door. Well, let's hope that she doesn't cause a scene if she does show up. I'd be more worried that Nyla will actually try to kill you. You know, with everyone being distracted, it would be the perfect opportunity. Zuko rolled his eyes. I'm fairly certain that if she shows up, June isn't going to bring her Shirshu into the wedding hall. Why not? Asked the tribesman. We're letting Akela in. That's because despite how big that wolf of yours has gotten, it's the only one of 2 who would be able to fit inside the hall and is the only one who knows how to behave. Akela had finally stopped growing, reaching Sokka's shoulder. And if June did let him in, she wouldn't let Nyla kill Naruto, not on what's supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life. More like nerve-wracking than happy, the Fire Paragon said. Trust me, Naruto. It will be happy in the end, the Fire Lord promised him. I hope so. Naruto, I know that you've been firm about this ever since we got back, Sokka began, hesitating a little. But we can still try to get some of the people from Konoha to the wedding or at least, the wedding feast. Naruto's eyes hardened. No. His voice was firm. My decision stays. No shinobi will ever come to the Bending Countries again. It was one of the first things he laid down when they had returned to helping with the creation of the 5th country, rejoining its building committee. He had a law passed for all of the countries that stated anything that dealt with the elemental countries as a whole, aside from what few trading routes there already were between the 2 continents, were forbidden. We've got enough problems on our hands, he reasoned. We do not need any more that would come with shinobi. Despite what the rest of Team Paragon and Team Avatar thought about the law, the Earth King and the rest of the committee agreed with what he said and voted the law in. The shinobi also couldn't sneak in for a visit because Naruto had done something to the transportation seal that rendered incredibly long-range movements, such as from one continent to another, impossible. The tribesman sighed in defeat. All right, I had to ask. No, you didn't. Naruto, I thought you had made your peace with Konoha, Zuko said. I did somewhat. His eyes wandered over to the nearby table where a pack of cigarettes and his lighter lay. He briefly considered lighting one but decided against it. Despite the fact it had been 2 years since they had come back, he still hadn't told anyone about the voice in his head that had been planted by the Kodo Amatsukami. Look, I don't hate them if that's what you mean. But it's in everyone's best interests to keep the 2 continents separate from one another. Besides, you guys can still send letters. I know you've been doing that. He had been doing that himself with the other Jinchuriki who had come back with him. He had been quite surprised to learn that the Mizukage had married Utakata, which, apparently, had stemmed from a wild night that started with bar hopping and ended up in his bed. It is better than nothing, Sokka admitted. He was corresponding regularly with Shikamaru. Each letter back and forth contained a shogi move within the correspondence, as both of them missed their games. That it is, the Fire Lord agreed before looking at the groom. By the way, Naruto, when is the next book coming out? The blonde smirked. Hoping to get a sneak peek, are you? Soon after they had returned from the elemental countries, Naruto had published his book. It was a modest success in both continents, which was enough for him to write a sequel. And with each book he published, the total number was currently at 3, the more successful they were becoming. He smiled in return. Can you blame me? They're quite addicting to read. Sokka nodded in agreement. He's right, Naruto. I'd say that if they keep going on like that, in some years, the copies that are autographed are going to be worth a fortune. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Funny, I thought that was already happening. The water paragon rolled his eyes. Fandrels don't count, and you know it. That's a point to him, Zuko idly commented. That's because you still don't have any, last time I checked, the fire paragon retorted. And that's a point to you, the scarred dragon continued, keeping his facial expression and voice neutral. When both paragons gave him the same look of annoyance and exasperation, he couldn't help but crack a smile. Both Naruto and Sokka soon wore the same kind of smile and laughed. Ah, Kami, I needed that, the blonde said once the laughter died. Most of the tension he had been feeling was gone now. That reminds me, we came in here to fetch you, Sokka said. We're waiting on you. The relaxed feeling he had vanished. All right. We might as well start. He took a deep breath to steady himself. The blonde went for the door and pulled it open, coming face to face with the leader of the Yen archers. My lord, Baoyu saluted him as they stepped out of the room. Lieutenant, he said in reply, returning the salute. Are you ready? The archer struggled to keep a very dry smirk off of his face. With all due respect, my lord, but shouldn't I be asking you that question? Good point. I'm still asking for reasons of formality, he conceded, not hesitating to wear a grin on his face. Well, are you ready? As I'll ever be. So basically, not at all, Sokka commented with a sarcastic grin. The blonde threw a glare at the tribesman. Keep it up, Sokka. I'll return the favor when you finally decide to marry Suki, he promised before he turned back to look at Baoyu. Let's get the ball rolling. The leader of the Yen archers nodded his acknowledgement and turned around. Honor guard, attention! He barked out. The archers, who had been standing at ease alongside the walls, came to attention at the sound of his voice and formed a column on both sides of Naruto. They all marched down the hallway, Naruto in the middle with Zuko and Sokka trailing slightly behind. At the end of the hallway, the wedding awaited. Ozai sat against the wall of his cell, staring at nothing in particular. How long has it been since I've had a visit? He wondered. The only one he had was when the new Fire Lord had decided to grace him with said visit and inform him that his firstborn daughter, the one who he thought would succeed where his other children had failed him, was dead. That was maybe 10, 12, maybe even 14 years ago. Time had become a bit of a blur of him. But in the years he spent wallowing in this jail, he had time to think. He now realized that Yao Jing hadn't been the best of decisions. She was too wild, too hot-tempered, and too cruel to be a proper instrument of his will. And yet, she was the only one he had been left with after his other children betrayed him. I should have had that foreigner killed when I first heard of him, he thought, his thoughts turning towards Naruto. It was because of him that Azula had weakened and betrayed her own father, cutting her hair off to symbolize it. However, while he could blame Azula on Naruto, and as much as he would have loved to pin it on his wife, the blame of Zuko solely belonged with him. Sometimes, he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't scarred and banished his son. Would he have become the instrument of his will that he had hoped to create? There's no use wondering of different paths, he told himself whenever his mind wandered down that path. What has happened has happened. In a way, he supposed he could be glad for what happened to his son. From what little he had learned over the years, the new Fire Lord was not weak or cowardly. Despite that foolish idea of a new, fifth country, what idiocy, he had thought when he heard of it. While he had never denied that the colonies had been a place of progress, they were still ruled by the Fire Nation, and by definition, him, Zuko led and protected the Fire Nation. And as much as he didn't want to believe it, he knew that his son had good counsel in the form of Iroh. His older brother had been better at everything they did. That was partly the reason why he had wanted the throne so much. The door to the cell opened, getting his attention. A guard walked in and stood before the bars. Get up, he ordered. He simply looked up at the guard. Has the time for my execution come at last? He wondered aloud. Just get up, the guard repeated. You've got visitors coming in to see you. The Fire Lord has made it clear that executing you is merely taking the easy way out. He pulled the ring of keys off of his belt, found the right one, and opened the cell. Surprised by the news, Ozai didn't resist as the guard grabbed him by the arm, pulled him up to his feet, and marched him out of the cell. In silence they went down the hallways of the prison, their footsteps echoing all around them. A visitor? Thought Ozai. Who would want to visit me after all these years? He didn't dare to voice that question aloud. He was taken to a small room. It was only roomy enough for a table and 2 chairs on either side. The chair on his side of the room had manacles attached to the arms, which were placed around his wrists once he sat down in the chair. The guard walked back out the door they had come in and closed it behind him, leaving Ozai alone in the room. Who will be the one who will walk through that other door? He thought as he stared at said door. When it opened and his answer walked through it, he frowned. I thought I told you to never show yourself to me again, he said as his wife walked into the room and sat down opposite of him. I would say how nice it is to see you as well, Ozai. But I would be lying, Ursa replied. Besides, you said that I had to leave the palace, not show myself to you again. But it doesn't matter now. You're in no position to tell me what to do. Indeed, I am not, he conceded. Why are you here, Ursa? Our son has been insisting that I visit you at least once before one of us dies, she answered with a slight distaste. He caught the distaste. You disapprove of such weakness. I only disapprove of the fact I have to speak to you again, she corrected him. Our son cares about the both of us, even if we dislike each other. He snorted. Such weakness, he stated with contempt. Ah yes, that weakness you've spoken of is the only thing that has allowed you to survive all these years, Ursa reminded him. Despite what the Avatar might say, it would have been better if you had been killed. And yet I am still here. Unfortunately. They stayed silent for a few minutes, trying to stare the other down. It was Ozai who finally looked away. Try as he might, there was something about her gaze that made him want to look away. What is happening out in the world? He finally asked her, avoiding eye contact. Why would you want to know? I hunger for news. I receive so little of it here. He shrugged to emphasize his point about his surroundings. The 5th country has been established. Its first city is being constructed already. There was a twinge of excitement in her voice as she talked about it. He frowned at that. Foolishness, he declared. Why would they create a 5th country when the Fire Nation should rule all? It is our right. That had always been something he believed in. But apparently his supposed wife did not share the sentiment. You mean, that so-called right that has caused generations of people to suffer, just for that kind of glory? The truth is it is not our right. It has never been our right. It is no one's right. You shame your grandfather's memory by even thinking with that state of mind. Do not speak of Fire Lord Sozin like you knew him. He snapped at her, rage and fury filling his voice. He would have been ashamed of what the Fire Nation has become. No, I think he would be ashamed of his son and his grandson, she replied in an equal tone of voice. It wasn't as loud or as angry as his, but her voice also had fury and rage in it. Sozin did not want to dominate the other countries. He wanted to unify them, in order to prevent what you and your father have done. He would be proud of Zuko and Aang for doing what he and Roku couldn't. How did Naruto manage to find you anyway? He asked, changing the subject. That had always been something he had wondered at times. After he had exiled Zuko, he became worried that Ursa would hear of it and try to return to poison him in revenge. So he decided to act preemptively and send people to look for her and kill her. But they never found her, so he wondered how his daughter's bodyguard was able to. I don't honestly know, she told him. He just showed up one day and reminded me of who I was. And I'm sure your lover was happy about that. It had always angered him that she loved that man over him. As she heard those words, she scowled. He has a name, she told Ozai, her voice becoming laced with anger again. And we both know you know what it is. A small smirk appeared on his lips, pleased at her anger. Icum, wasn't it? I suppose that you, he, and whatever spawn the two of you have created are living happily. The anger was replaced by sadness. He and my daughter, Ki, died 2 months before Naruto found me, from a sickness that swept through the village, she answered simply. Again, there was silence in the room. If you are waiting for me to say I am sorry about what I said, you will be sorely disappointed, he told her. You are my wife. The wife of the Fire Lord should not go about having lovers and bastard children. You have no place to talk about that, Ozai, not with Yao Jing. And we were all but divorced in name when I left the capital, she said in reply, the sadness leaving and the anger returning. So do not speak of lovers and bastards to me. I don't leave the other parent of my child burned and scarred just because they wanted to see her for a single day. He grimaced at those words. What he did that day had earned him the disapproval of everyone in his family. When Azulin had found out about the child growing in Chun's womb, he told Ozai that one of two things were going to happen. He would either take the child from its mother and raise it in the palace, or he would be cast out of the royal family and take care of the child on the streets. Naturally, he didn't want to be cast out. So, he took the child, gave her a name, and raised her in the palace. When Chun had asked to see her, he had thought that one day would lead to another, and another, and another, until finally she would have tried to keep Yao Jing for herself. So, he took steps. But as with Yao Jing, he had come to the conclusion that those weren't the steps he should have taken. If I had let her see her daughter, would Yao Jing have turned out differently? He had often wondered. But again, what was done was done. There was nothing he could do to change it. Let us agree on this then. I will not speak ill of your dead, and you will not speak ill of mine, he offered, willing to give a small truce. Her nod was small. Very well. I will admit that what happened with Yao Jing was not one of my better decisions. I should have reined her in when she was younger, Ozai admitted with a tone of regret. There were a lot of things that you should have done when the children were younger, she replied with some small bite. He narrowed his eyes on her. We both know that I am not entirely blameless there, Ursa. You made your fair share of mistakes with them as well. She held his gaze for a minute, before sighing and looking down at the table. I know, she admitted. I know that we've made mistakes with our children. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if things had gone differently. What has happened, he told her. There is nothing we can do to change that. That may be true. But don't you ever wonder what would have happened if we had made different choices? She asked him, her voice questioning and her face curious. No, I do not. He was lying. Wondering what would have happened was something that filled his time in this prison. But he wasn't going to let her know that. She would never have the pleasure of knowing that he had done the same as she. I may have realized that I have made mistakes, and I do regret some of them. I have never wondered what would have happened if things went differently. There's nothing we can do about it, so why would we even bother? She shook her head in slight exasperation. There's the man I married and grew to despise, she remarked with a small, dignified roll of her eyes. I always did prefer you to go back to the way things had been in the beginning. And what does that mean? He asked with an arched eyebrow. How were things different in the beginning? You actually tried to be a father to our children. Somehow, her voice almost had an accusing tone to it. Now he knew what she meant. Yes, I suppose I did try in the beginning. But things changed, and as I said before, I am not entirely blameless for that, he reminded her. I know. She stood up from the chair. We weren't really good parents, Ozai, she said as she walked back to the door. But perhaps we can be decent grandparents. The remark stunned him. What? Ursa answered the question when she opened the door and allowed someone else to walk in. Azula? It was his former daughter. But she was different now. She was no longer a girl, she was a woman in her own right. In fact, despite the fact that her hair still remained short, she looked like a younger version of Ursa. But her golden eyes held no warmth for him. Rather, they told him that she didn't really want to be here. Ozai, she said, her voice curt and short. I want you to meet someone. Her eyes traveled downward and lit up with warmth and happiness. He followed her gaze and finally realized that she had been carrying a toddler at her side, with red hair, golden eyes much like her, and wore a happy and innocent smile. This is Sozen Uzumaki, your grandson. Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this what if, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love. Peace out, Shinobi!